Hey guys, tonight we're diving deep into a version of your life that would make Navy SEAL training look like a yoga retreat. This is what your life would actually be like as a Spartan soldier, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. Literally, statistically, spiritually, your odds are as good as a snowflake in a forge. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know, what city are you in and what time is it right now? Let me know in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're not born in a hospital. There are no nurses, no name tags, no soft blankets. You're born on hard earth in the city-state of Sparta, probably somewhere around 500 BCE, when the laws of Lycurgus rule every breath you'll ever take. You are male, and that's already a 50-50 gamble on whether your life continues past today. The midwives inspect you thoroughly, too thoroughly. They check your body for symmetry, strength, signs of vitality. Are your limbs straight? Your skull smooth? Do your lungs cry loud enough to rattle a sword rack? If not, you're done. Literally discarded. Because in Sparta, weakness isn't nurtured, it's cold. Some babies are left on Mount Taygetus, exposed to the elements as a cruel but normalised version of quality control. You survive the culling. Barely. Maybe you screamed just loud enough, maybe your limbs looked long enough. Either way, you're handed over to your mother, but don't get too attached. She's loving, yes, but practical. Spartan women are trained to produce warriors. She'll feed you barley gruel, maybe a little goat milk, and then teach you not to cry. Crying is for Athenians and dead men. Your father? He barely looks at you. He's still living in a military barracks with the rest of his unit, and frankly, he's waiting to see if you make it to age 7 before he emotionally invests. Those early years are deceptively gentle. You run around the courtyard naked with other toddlers. You learn to mimic the grown-ups drilling in formation. You might even sneak off to watch your older brother train with wooden swords, faces bloodied, teeth missing. You think it looks fun? It's not. You'll find out soon enough. The only books around, if there are any, are about war. No picture books, no bedtime stories unless they involve spears, guts, or divine vengeance. You hear tales of Leonidas, of Heracles, of mythical Spartan heroes who killed lions and Persians alike with their bare hands. They become your fairy tales, except they're expected to be your reality. At age 6, you're healthy, wiry, and already good at climbing trees and getting into fights with the neighbours' kids. That's when the elders start watching you. Not with affection, but with evaluation. They don't want charm, they want silence. Obedience. The ability to take a slap without flinching. One day, a visiting elder asks you a question about battle tactics. Not because he expects a smart answer, but because he wants to see if you can speak without whining. You do. You pass. For now. Then comes your 7th birthday, and the real horror begins. No cake, no party. You're taken from your home. Yes, taken. You don't get a say. Your mother doesn't cry, your father nods solemnly. You're now enrolled in the Agoge, Sparta's infamous state-run boot camp for boys. You'll stay there for more than a decade. What's the curriculum? Violence, deprivation, obedience, pain tolerance, the ability to kill with your bare hands while making it look like an accident. Also, dance and poetry. Weirdly, you're herded into a large communal barracks with dozens of other boys your age. The smell? A mix of sweat, smoke, and something you'll eventually learn is dried pig's blood. You're stripped of your clothes and issued one tunic. One for the whole year. No shoes. Winter is coming, but you don't get fur or cloaks. You're told this is to toughen you up. It mostly toughens your skin into cracked leather and your soul into stone. The first night you don't sleep. Someone punches you for snoring. Someone else steals your bread. The instructors are adult Spartans, serious men with scars across their faces and expressions like dried granite. They teach you with sticks and sarcasm. If you fall behind in training, you're whipped. If you complain, you're whipped harder. If you cry, they ignore you. But the older boys won't. The days are brutal. Physical drills from sunup to sundown. You're not fed enough. You get one meal a day, some weak broth, and a chunk of coarse bread that feels like chewing sandstone. Hunger becomes your most consistent companion. Your body starts adapting, your mind begins to unravel, but you don't say a word. That would be weakness, and weakness gets you more beatings, or worse, exile. One morning, you're told to fight another boy over a spot near the fire. No weapons, just fists, knees, teeth. Everyone watches. You're expected to bleed, win or lose. You do. The elder nods. He's learning, he says. Learning what exactly? That pain is permanent? That safety is fiction? That comfort is a foreign concept reserved for the dead? Yeah, you're learning. Here's the historical fact. Every male Spartan citizen went through this. It wasn't optional. The Agoge was mandatory, relentless, and enforced by law. It created one of the most feared warrior classes in ancient history, but also one of the most traumatized. And here's your fringe detail for the night. Some scholars believe boys in the Agoge were encouraged to form intense emotional bonds with older boys or mentors, relationships that blurred the lines between brotherhood and romance. The idea? That emotional loyalty would make the phalanx unbreakable in battle. Awkward to think about when you're getting punched for blinking too slow. Now for the scholarly debate. Was the Agoge truly about creating elite warriors, or was it a carefully controlled social experiment in manufacturing obedience and fear? Some historians argue the latter, that Sparta wasn't a warrior's paradise, but a militarized prison state powered by paranoia and hierarchy. You're just trying to make it to the next meal. You're 7 years old, barefoot in the dirt, bruised, hungry, and surrounded by boys who are just as scared as you, even if no one dares admit it. And this is just day one. You don't remember exactly when you stopped crying, probably sometime after your fourth beating. There wasn't a dramatic turning point, no slow-motion cinematic moment, just a dull numbness that settled into your bones like fog over the Eurotas River. You wake up each morning before the sun, stripped of dreams, stiff from the cold stone floor and already exhausted. The boy next to you snores like he's forgotten where he is. You envy that. Your body aches constantly now. Your knees are scraped raw, your hands thick with calluses, and your back is striped with fading welts from a recent punishment. You'd think this would make you tougher. It doesn't. It just makes you used to pain. That's the Agoge's true trick. It doesn't toughen you so much as it normalizes misery. Hunger, discomfort, humiliation, they're your new constants. Like weather, but worse. Breakfast is a joke, a greyish stew of barley mush that tastes faintly of ash and despair. You don't complain, no one complains. Complaining is an invitation to be singled out and humiliated in front of the others. So instead, you focus on the drills, shield formations, mock duels, endurance tests that feel like punishment disguised as sport. You run until your lungs burn and your vision starts to swim. But quitting isn't allowed. Not because the instructors say so, but because the boys around you would never let you live it down. They're not friends, not exactly. You're all competitors. And yet paradoxically, you're all brothers. Every time someone gets caught stealing food or fails to keep pace during training or cries out during a beating, it's the group that pays, so you watch each other closely. You coach the weak ones, not out of kindness but out of self-preservation. Their failures become your punishment. Speaking of stealing, that's now part of your education. Hunger becomes your teacher, and theft your homework. You're actually encouraged to steal. Not food from the kitchen or money from the instructors. That would be too easy. No, you're told to sneak into supply rooms, lift bread from the mess tent, or swipe cheese from the altars. If you succeed, you get to eat. If you get caught, you're whipped. Not for stealing, but for being bad at it. You learn quickly. Your first attempt is a disaster. You go for an apple, knock over a jar, and freeze as two older boys pounce on you. You don't scream even when the instructor lashes your legs with a knotted rope. You limp for days afterward. You think about the apple a lot. Not the taste, but the cell. Sweet, forbidden, worth it. The nights aren't any better. You're not allowed to use blankets. Your tunic barely covers your thighs. When the wind picks up, it cuts through you like a knife dipped in ice. You huddle near the fire with the others, pretending not to shiver, pretending not to care. One boy, Aristandros, is caught warming his hands too long. The instructor pulls him away and throws him outside. He's out there all night. The next morning he's pale, lips blue. He still has to train. No exceptions. Despite all this, or maybe because of it, your body begins to change. Your arms swell with muscle. Your legs turn to iron. Your reflexes sharpen. You begin to feel something dangerous. Pride. You start to enjoy the combat drills. You begin to crave the moment your wooden sword crashes against another boy's shield, the jolt running up your arms like lightning. You're becoming what they want you to be, what they need you to be. But that comes with a new cost. The instructors start watching you more closely. When you show promise, they push harder. They break you down even more, and when you do well, They never praise you. Spartan education doesn't reward achievement, it expects it. Praise is suspicious. Praise makes you soft. So instead, you're left guessing whether you've impressed them or simply survived another day. Then comes your first real fight. Not a sparring match, not a test. A sanctioned bare-knuckle brawl in front of the entire barracks. You're paired against a boy named Menon. Taller than you, meaner. He already has 2 broken noses under his belt. Other people's. You're nervous, but showing it is forbidden. You march into the circle of boys. They shout, not for you, but for violence. The fight begins and he lunges. He hits fast and hard, driving his fist into your ribs with the precision of someone who enjoys the crunch. You swing back, catch his jaw, and his teeth clack together. Blood blooms. Someone cheers. You don't remember most of it, just flashes. His boot slamming into your thigh. Your elbow catching him in the neck. The way your vision tunnels until all you see is movement and pain. You win, or at least you're the one still standing when it's over. He's coughing blood, you're wheezing. No one claps. Here's your historical fact. These fights were part of everyday life in the Agoge. Not occasional scuffles, but institutionalized violence. The stronger boys dominated. The weaker learned quickly or suffered. There was no time or space for compassion. That would just get you hurt. And for tonight's strange fringe note, there were rumours of secret duels arranged by instructors who used the boys like chess pieces in elaborate social experiments. They'd pit best friends against each other. Just to see what broke first, loyalty or the body. Whether or not that's true is debated, but in Sparta nothing seems too far-fetched. Which brings us to a question scholars still debate. Did the Agoge produce fearless warriors, or traumatized children weaponized by trauma? Some argue that Spartans were conditioned into a state of semi-controlled sociopathy, incapable of emotion beyond rage and loyalty to the state. Others think it forged unparalleled discipline. But almost all agree it destroyed the individual. You, though? You're still here, bruised, bloodied, but standing. You sleep that night with a swollen jaw, your tunic stiff with dried sweat and mud. You don't dream. You've stopped doing that. But somewhere deep in the back of your skull, a small voice whispers that you might just survive. Not thrive, never that, but survive. Maybe. It's been months now, though time in the Agoge is more theory than reality. You measure your life in bruises and hunger pangs, not days or seasons. You can't recall when the bruises stopped bothering you, or when your sense of taste gave up the ghost. Every meal is the same, every lesson brutal, every night a gamble between sleep and frostbite. And yet, there's something else beginning to emerge. A dangerous, low-burning fire that wasn't there before. Fury, perhaps, or worse, pride. Your body has started to resemble something sculpted, not grown. Veins thread your arms like vines, your thighs thud with weight when you walk. You're still a boy, technically, but only if someone squints hard and forgets how many broken noses you've caused. The instructors have taken notice. They don't say anything, of course. That would imply recognition. Instead, they simply beat you harder and test you longer. That's how you know you're improving, your suffering intensifies. Today you're handed a short wooden sword and paired off with a new boy. He's fresh, maybe just arrived. His eyes are still too wide. He says "sir" too much. He still flinches when someone raises a hand too fast. You remember being like him for about 2 days. You don't feel sympathy, you're too far gone for that, but you do feel a twinge of something, memory. It's gone before you can name it. You spar. The wooden blade slaps against his ribs, again and again. He grunts. He tries to fight back. You parry with ease and strike again. He drops to one knee. You're told not to stop until he's down and motionless. That's the rule. You hesitate for a second, just one, but it's long enough to earn you a boot in the back from your instructor. Don't pity, kill, he hisses. You finish the match. The boy groans in the dirt and you walk away, your arms buzzing from impact. This is your first taste of real dominance. Not in theory, not the drills and shouts, but the actual unsettling power of being stronger than someone who's trying to fight back. It twists something in your chest. Something that used to be soft. You ignore it. Better to not feel anything. And then comes a day unlike the others. The usual training is cancelled. You're ordered to gather in a courtyard near the city's edge, where the instructors stand grim-faced beneath a heavy bronze statue of Ares. They announce a test, not of skill or strength, of character. You're told to track a wild animal through the woods, kill it, and return with proof. No tools, no cloak, no food, just your tunic, your fists, and whatever resolve you've got left. You're released into the trees with a few dozen other boys. The forest feels alien after the regimental claustrophobia of the barracks. The silence is too loud. Every leaf crunch is a scream. You trek for hours. The air grows colder. Hunger claws at you, but there's nothing to eat except roots and regret. You spot a hare. It darts before you can react. Then, after what feels like an entire lifetime, you see a boar, massive, ugly, ripping up the ground like it owes him money. You don't think, you just run toward it, not away. You grab a sharpened branch you found hours earlier and plunge it forward as the beast charges. The impact knocks you flat, your ears ringing. You roll, scramble, thrust again. There's a terrible squeal, then silence. You sit in stunned disbelief, the world swaying. You did it. You actually killed something bigger than you. You return to the barracks with its tusk tied to your belt, your tunic soaked in blood. The instructors nod. One even grunts approval. This is as close as you'll ever get to being called special. Your historical fact here is almost cinematic. Spartan boys were routinely sent into the wilderness to fend for themselves, either as a test of survival or as part of a coming-of-age ritual. These weren't controlled school trips with safety nets. They were make-or-break trials designed to separate warriors from corpses. And for your quirky detail, this one's wild. There are rumours that some boys during these excursions were encouraged to fight wild animals barehanded, especially wolves. Why? Because wolves were symbols of strength and danger. Killing one supposedly transferred its spirit to you, or you just died horribly in a bush. Either outcome was educational. And now the scholarly debate. Some historians argue that the Agoge wasn't solely about violence and endurance. It was about crafting ideal citizens who were obedient, cunning, and capable of absolute self-control. Others disagree, seeing it more as a system of psychological warfare that turned children into weapons, emotionally stunted and socially narrow. Were Spartans the ultimate soldiers, or the ultimate victims of their own myth? You don't care about any of that. Not really. All you know is that tonight, as you sit near the fire with dried boar's blood caked on your arms, the other boys look at you differently. Not with admiration, that would be too generous, but with a wary sort of respect. You're not one of the weak ones anymore. You're someone they have to think twice about crossing. You lie back on the cold stone floor, eyes open, listening to the fire crackle. Your body is a battlefield of aches and scars, but your mind is strangely still. You've survived your first real hunt. You've fought, bled, and returned. That makes you dangerous. But it also makes you more alone. No one celebrates your victory. There are no toasts, no cheers, just silence and the occasional sniff of someone trying not to cough up blood. You fall asleep knowing that tomorrow it starts all over again, and the next day, and the one after that, until you're no longer a boy at all, but something else, something Sparta wants, something Sparta owns. You've lost count of how many nights you've slept on stone. Your body's too sore to keep a tally, and time doesn't work the same way here. It's measured in bruises, in blisters, in quiet victories no one's allowed to mention. But you know this much. The seasons have turned. The wind bites deeper, and your breath clouds the air now. And you're still not wearing shoes. Let's talk about that, because it's not just a cute historical detail. You're barefoot. Always. In the cold on rocks, through ice. The adults say it builds endurance, toughens the soul. What it builds mostly are calluses that crack and bleed when the frost sets in. You try not to limp because limping is weakness and weakness is invitation. The older boys, those already halfway to manhood, will make sure you regret every misstep. So you pretend your feet don't feel like shattered pottery. You walk as though the frozen earth is a soft blanket. You lie, constantly. But that's what surviving here is. High stakes pretend. One morning you wake to find a snow crust coating the courtyard. Your breath comes in little white bursts like your body's trying to signal distress. You expect the drills to be cancelled. Of course they aren't. Instead, you're told to run laps, shirtless, barefoot, through snow. Welcome to the Spartan concept of tough love. The instructors line up watching, arms crossed like sculpted gargoyles. You run, your feet go numb, you run more, you can't feel your fingers. Still, you run. Another boy collapses. The rest of you don't stop, that's part of the test. Compassion is admirable in poetry. Here it's fatal. If he lives, great. If not, the group becomes smaller, leaner, more efficient. The herd trims itself. This is where the Agoge reveals its next layer. It's not just a physical trial. It's psychological warfare disguised as childhood. Every moment is engineered to isolate you, to erode your sense of self. Your identity becomes one of many. Your value is how well you blend into the phalanx, how precisely you can move like the limb of a larger beast. You don't speak out of turn, you don't ask questions, you don't express doubt. The instructors aren't just watching your form, they're watching your soul, waiting for cracks. And the food, if it could even be called that, it gets worse. You're served something called melas zomos, which translates directly to black broth. Imagine pig's blood boiled with vinegar, salt, and a few meat scraps that taste suspiciously like regret. It looks like something scraped from the bottom of a sacrificial pit and smells worse. But you eat it. You always eat it. Hunger has no preferences, it just devours. Here's your historical fact for the night. That black broth wasn't just legend, it was real. And Spartans believed it toughened their stomachs and simplified their appetites. Foreigners who visited Sparta gagged at the very idea of it. One story even has a visiting Sybarite claiming that if that's what courage tastes like, he's happy being a coward. You're beginning to understand that joke, but food isn't just sustenance here, it's leverage. When you perform well, you might get an extra piece of bread. When you slip up, your rations are cut. Hunger is a whip you carry in your gut, constantly reminding you who's in control. The body becomes an obedient animal when it's starving. Despite it all, or maybe because of it, you're getting faster, sharper. You begin to anticipate the instructor's movements before they speak. Your hand automatically moves to guard your ribs when another boy shifts too quickly nearby. You sleep in half-alert chunks, ears always twitching for footsteps. It's not quite paranoia, it's preparation. One night, you overhear two older trainees whispering about the krypteia, the most terrifying rumour in all of Agoge life. You lean in. Apparently once you're 18, the state selects a few promising trainees and sends them out to kill. Not enemies, not criminals, but helots, enslaved people. You're told it's a rite of passage, a way to keep the population in check. But it sounds more like a horror story. They go out at night dressed in black, armed with knives, and them told to kill without being keen. If they're caught, they fail. If they are not stealthy enough, they fail. If they hesitate, you guessed it, failure and probably execution. Here's your quirky detail for the night. The krypteia wasn't just state-sanctioned murder. It was possibly a kind of psychological filter, designed to identify who could kill without remorse and follow orders without blinking. It's not even clear if it was real in the way we imagine it. Historians still debate whether it was an organised military program, a policing force, or terrifying propaganda. Regardless, you now live under the constant cloud that you might be chosen for it one day. Lucky you. That brings us to the scholarly debate. What exactly was the purpose of this whole barefoot in the snow, boil your own blood stew of a training program? Was it truly about building the perfect warrior, or was it about social control, creating not individuals but interchangeable cogs in the Spartan war machine? Some historians say it was brilliantly efficient, producing soldiers with nearly unshakable discipline. Others argue it stripped away humanity, that the Spartans won battles but lost their souls in the process. You're 17 now and your soul is starting to feel optional. Some nights, when the others are asleep, you sneak out to the edge of the training grounds. Not far, just to a little rise overlooking the city. From there you can see the fires burning in the homes of real Spartans. The ones who've graduated, the ones with full citizenship. They live in houses, with roofs, with wives. They get to eat lamb and olives and drink actual wine, not vinegar sludge. You watch the lights flicker and wonder if you'll ever get there. If you'll live that long. If the version of you that survives the Agoge will even want to. And then you go back to your barracks, lie down next to the others, and sleep with one eye half open. Because tomorrow the snow might fall harder, the broth might come colder, and your feet, bare and bleeding, will still be expected to carry you across stone and frost like a ghost made of iron. You wake up starving. That's not new. Hunger's been your alarm clock for over a decade now, but this morning it's different, sharper. Your stomach growls so loud that the boy next to you opens one eye and grunts. You're both on the edge. The stew last night was barely a spoonful. and the cold has been cutting deeper into you lately. Bones ache in places you didn't know existed. You've got 2 cracked toenails, a bruised rib, and the look of someone who might eat moss if it came with seasoning. And today the instructors make things worse. On purpose, of course. It starts like any other morning. A horn blares in the grey dawn. You snap awake, pull on your crusty tunic and line up outside with the others. No talking, no stretching, no complaints. A senior instructor strides up and announces today's challenge, foraging, which, in Spartan speak, means stealing. You're told to leave the barracks, venture into the city, and find food. Any food. Bring it back by nightfall or don't come back at all. Oh, and don't get caught, naturally. You and a handful of others slip into the alleyways of Sparta, stomachs leading the way. The city looks different when you're not surrounded by shouting instructors and the clank of wooden swords. Quiet, suspiciously peaceful. It's early, and the market's just beginning to stir. Bakers are hauling bread from brick ovens. A goat wanders down an alley, chewing something that probably used to be valuable. You can smell olives, fish, figs, stuff you haven't tasted in years. You split off from the others and head toward the outskirts, where the helot huts line the base of the hills. The helots don't live like you. They're slaves, tied to the land and forced to farm for the Spartan state. They grow the food that you and your instructors eat, but you're still expected to act like they're beneath you. It's a twisted system, and you don't have the energy to untangle it. You're just trying to find something edible. A woman, older, probably a helot, sees you creeping behind her garden and mutters something under her breath. You freeze. She glares at you, then looks away. Doesn't say a word, doesn't call for help. Maybe she recognizes the look in your eyes. Or maybe she's just tired of it all. Either way, you snatch 2 figs and a chunk of dried meat hanging on a line and vanish before anyone else notices. You sprint through the olive groves, lungs burning, until you're sure you're alone. You sit under a tree and eat half the figs, tucking the meat into your tunic. The taste is electric, sweet, chewy, real. You try not to cry, not out of emotion, but because you don't want to waste the salt. That's how bad it's gotten. You make it back to camp just before dusk. One boy doesn't return. No one asks what happened to him. That's the rule. If he's caught, he's whipped. Or worse. If he ran, he's a coward. Either way, he's gone. The instructors examine your haul and nod. You're not praised, you're simply not punished. That's victory in this place. Here's your historical fact. Stealing was formally encouraged in the Agoge. It wasn't about the food, it was about cunning. Spartan leaders wanted warriors who could operate behind enemy lines, survive without supply chains, and outwit anyone in their path. If you stole and succeeded, you were resourceful. If you failed, you lacked discipline. Simple. And your fringe fact for tonight? There are whispered stories that some boys got so good at stealing they made a game of it, competing to see who could sneak into the instructors' quarters and take personal items. One boy supposedly stole a sandal, wore it on his head, and dared the instructor to find it missing. He was beaten half to death, but he also became something of a legend, which leads to a deeper debate. Was Spartan training about survival or humiliation? Some scholars argue the Agoge deliberately broke the boys to make them dependent on the state, a psychological version of armour. Others think it was designed to build independence, a kind of brutal self-reliance where even food had to be earned through cleverness. Both arguments make sense. Neither makes it easier to swallow that dried meat without choking on your own pride. That night, you lie back on your slab of stone, body sore, gut a little less empty. You stare up at the rafters, wooden beams marked with soot and age. A rat scurries across one, pauses, then vanishes. You envy its freedom. No drills, no punishments, no expectations. Just the instinct to take what it needs and disappear. You wonder what your own instincts are now. Hunger, survival, violence. It's hard to tell where the Agoge ends and you begin. You shift slightly and feel the meat still hidden in your tunic. You consider eating it, but then, something odd, you don't. Instead, you slip it to the boy next to you. The younger one who split his lip in training yesterday and hasn't been able to chew properly since. He doesn't thank you. He just eats it slowly, eyes never meeting yours. But you hear his breath catch, like he wasn't expecting it. Like maybe something human still flickers in this pit of cold and cruelty. No one else sees, no one ever will. But that flicker, you hold on to it quietly, fiercely, because you know that one day, maybe soon, the tests will change again. And then, it won't be food you're expected to steal, it'll be blood, 18 years old. You've made it this far, which, in Spartan terms, makes you both dangerous and deeply suspicious. You've survived the frostbitten winters, the starvation drills, the beatings, the bloodbaths, the lectures that were just threats with grammar. You've learned to sleep lightly, eat quickly, fight dirty, and think even dirtier. You're no longer a child, though no one would ever accuse you of being a full adult either. Not yet. There's still one more threshold to cross, and it's the one that no one talks about out loud. The krypteia. You've heard rumours about it for years. Whispered among the older boys during rare quiet nights. It always sounded half myth, half nightmare. A secret order within the Spartan machine, meant for the most promising, the most brutal, the most unflinching. And now, one early morning as the fog still hugs the ground, your name is called. No ceremony, no warning. Just a bark from an instructor and a nod toward the edge of the barracks. You follow without a word. That's your final test. Obedience in the face of absolute uncertainty. You're taken to a low stone building you've never noticed before. Inside, it's dark and choked with incense smoke. There are 3 elders seated at the far end, cloaked in crimson and black. They don't smile. One speaks, voice dry like cracked parchment. You are now under oath to Sparta and to the Council of Elders. What you do tonight will not be recorded. It will not be celebrated. It will not be forgiven if you fail. No pressure, obviously. You're given a black cloak, a dagger with no markings, and a long silence before being dismissed. Outside, 2 other boys are waiting. They don't speak, you don't ask questions. The 3 of you melt into the night like ink spilled across parchment. Your task? Simple in that awful Spartan way. You're to patrol the Helot settlements, the massive underclass of enslaved people who farm and build and break their backs so Spartans can focus solely on war. The state fears rebellion, always has. The Helots outnumber citizens 5, maybe 10 to 1, and so the solution has always been terror. Strategic, silent, surgical terror. You're not told to kill, but you're not told not to either. That's the trick. You're meant to interpret your orders according to Sparta's interests, which, let's be honest, is a poetic way of saying murder someone who looks like they might start trouble. You spend the first hour stalking the outer fields. Everything is quiet. The Helots are asleep in their huts, crammed together in cold, soot-covered clusters. You hear a baby cry somewhere. You keep walking. There's a firelight flickering from one hut. An old man sits just outside it, sharpening a hoe in silence. He doesn't look at you, but he knows you're there. Everyone always knows when the black-cloaked shadows arrive. You don't kill him. You could, you're expected to, but you keep walking. That small flicker of something, maybe it's doubt, maybe it's humanity, flares up again. You hope it's not fatal, but your companion isn't as conflicted. An hour later, you hear a struggle. You turn the corner just as a Helot boy, maybe 13, collapses onto the dirt, blood leaking from a wound in his side. One of your fellow initiates stands above him, dagger slick in hand, breathing hard. You freeze. The scene is too quiet. The dying boy stares up at the sky, not at you. He isn't screaming, he just blinks. A few more times, then stops. You want to speak, but you don't. You don't help. You just memorize the smell, iron and smoke and olive leaves, and you walk away, like you've been trained to. Your historical fact, the krypteia was real as far as we know. Plutarch wrote about it as a secret policing force designed to intimidate and control the Helots. Selected young men were sent out under cover of darkness to kill any Helots deemed dangerous. It was equal parts terror tactic and psychological stress test. Think of it as the final paper in your degree in state-sponsored brutality. But here's the fringe twist. Some scholars believe the krypteia wasn't just about control. It might have also been a filter to identify sociopaths. Those who could kill without flinching were marked for greater roles in Spartan command. Those who hesitated too long vanished, silently, without ceremony. Sparta didn't need empathy. It needed tools. And the debate? Oh, this one's juicy. Historians can't agree whether the krypteia was a functional part of Spartan law enforcement or a glorified gang of child assassins. Some even argue it was propaganda, designed to scare Helots without ever actually being deployed. If so, it worked. The Helots were always afraid. You would be too, if ghost-faced teenagers with blades roamed your village each night and never left a trail. You return before dawn, quietly. The instructor nods once and tells you to go wash. That's it. No ceremony, no promotion, no explanation. You're not told if you passed, but they don't beat you. That's your confirmation. For now, you spend the day in a strange fog, not just from lack of sleep, but from something deeper. A weight pressing against your chest. Not guilt, not exactly. Ugh. You didn't kill anyone, but you watched it happen. And you did nothing. That's not innocence. That's compliance. That's worse. But you can't talk about it, ever. The krypteia isn't discussed, not even among those who've survived it. It's like a scar across your soul that everyone pretends isn't there. So you carry it, buried deep, sealed under layers of obedience and sweat. You're still a Spartan in training, not yet a full citizen, not yet a full monster, but close. And the line between those two states is getting harder to see. You'd think after all that, after the theft, the beatings, the blood-soaked nights of the krypteia, things might get easier. That the worst is behind you, that Sparta, in its infinite cruelty, might toss you a small olive branch. Something like, oh, say, decent food, maybe a hot bath that doesn't double as a test of lung capacity. But no. Instead, they reward your survival with what can only be described as culinary punishment. Because now, your meals revolve around something infamous even by Spartan standards. Melas zomos, black broth. You've tasted it before, of course, everyone in the Agoge has. But now, it's your staple, not a punishment or a test, just dinner. Congratulations, you've leveled up to daily doses of despair in a bowl. You sit with the others in the communal mess hall, a low, smoky room that always smells like wet iron and regret. A large pot bubbles over a hearth, and as it's ladled into bowls, the thick, dark liquid lets off steam that smells vaguely of scorched pennies and overcooked liver. You look down. The broth is nearly black, with the oily sheen of pig's blood and the occasional glob of fat rising like a long-forgotten survivor trying to escape. You try not to breathe through your nose. You definitely don't make eye contact with the bowl. There's bread too, if you can call it that. More like a hardened disc of barley that feels like someone took a brick, rolled it in sand, and dared you to eat it without cracking a molar. You dip it in the broth. It softens slightly, but now it tastes like death. Progress? You eat in silence as always. Talking during meals is discouraged. Focus on the food, or in this case, the threat that it poses to your taste buds. No one complains though, not even sarcastically. That's the Spartan way. If it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. And if it does kill you, well, at least it wasn't retreat. Your historical fact here is straightforward and disturbing. Melassomos was a real dish consumed by Spartan men, especially those in military messes. It consisted of pig's blood, vinegar, and salt, often with scraps of meat. Foreigners who tasted it reportedly gagged on the spot, which honestly feels like the most relatable thing any ancient Greek ever did. And here's your fringe detail. Legend has it that one visiting diplomat from Sybaris, a famously luxurious and soft city-state, was offered Spartan black broth. After one taste, he declared, "Now I understand why Spartans don't fear death." Which is a sick burn, historically speaking, and probably the last time someone laughed in that mess hall. But food in Sparta was never about enjoyment. It was about fuel, control, uniformity. The meals were part of the broader design to strip away indulgence, ego, and individuality. You didn't eat to be full, you ate to function, to endure, to suffer efficiently. Still deep down you wonder what it would be like to eat something good. A roasted fish drizzled with olive oil, fresh figs and honey, even something as simple as a warm loaf of bread with butter. You've heard whispers that Athenians, those artsy, democracy-loving weaklings, eat that kind of food every day. They sit in cafes and argue about philosophy between bites of lamb. Sounds like heaven or treason. Hard to tell, but you're not in Athens. You're in Sparta, and your dinner is daring you to puke in front of your brothers. You win the battle barely. You scrape the last bit of bread through the dark sludge, choke it down, and slide your bowl away. Across from you, one of the boys vomits quietly into his lap. No one flinches. The instructors don't even look up. He wipes his mouth and keeps eating. That's just how things are. The next day, training continues as if your stomach isn't currently hosting a festival of regrets. The spear drills are faster now, more aggressive. You're expected to hold formation longer, keep your shield tighter against the man beside you, pivot and thrust in perfect time. You've moved beyond being a solitary weapon. You're now part of a phalanx, a living wall of muscle, bronze. That's the lesson Spartan food teaches too. It's not about taste or tradition. It's about conformity. Everyone eats the same thing, at the same time, in the same way. You don't get seconds, you don't get preferences, you definitely don't get dessert. What you get is obedience, down to the last spoonful. Which brings us to the scholarly debate for tonight. Was Spartan austerity truly about making better soldiers, or was it a method of social engineering, designed to reinforce hierarchy and suppress rebellion? Some historians argue the cuisine was part of a broader philosophy of self-denial and military efficiency. Others say it was just control, plain and simple. Keep the citizens lean and hungry and they'll be too tired to question why they're suffering. You don't know which answer is right. You just know you'd murder someone for a fig pie right now. That night your stomach gurgles like it's trying to escape. You lie flat on your back, tunic pulled tight, and stare at the rafters. You can feel the broth still sloshing somewhere inside you, threatening to reappear, but you hold it in, just like you hold in your exhaustion, your doubts, your memories of warm meals and soft beds. You swallow it all down. Every Spartan does. Sleep takes a while to come. Your body's busy digesting the culinary equivalent of punishment, and your brain won't stop replaying that diplomat's joke. Now I understand why Spartans don't fear death. It wasn't just a joke, it was a prophecy. Because if this is what life tastes like, then death must be a feast. You've been with these boys, these battered, sleepless, starved brothers, for more than a decade now. You know the sound of their footsteps in the dark, the way their breath changes right before a fight, and the subtle twitches in their fingers when they're too injured to admit it. They know you too, better than your own mother would, after all these years. This is no accident. The Agoge doesn't just build soldiers. It builds one singular, unbreakable thing, brotherhood. But not the tender, hand-holding childhood friendship kind. No, this is the kind forged under pressure so relentless it shatters anything soft. This bond is born from shared punishments, from defending each other in practice fights, from whispering advice through bloodied lips after the fifth failed takedown. You've bled with these boys, you've stolen with them, trained beside them, and watched some of them disappear in the middle of the night, too injured, too weak, or simply broken. You don't ask where they went, you learn not to. The instructors call it Syssitia, the communal dining groups that Spartans are assigned to for life. You're all in one now, more or less. It's where you eat your black broth, pass the coarse barley bread, and side-eye each other during announcements. The group becomes your identity, and while it might seem like a sleepaway camp from hell, the social pressure here is enough to flatten you. You remember when one boy, Timokos, fell asleep during evening inspection, just nodded off for a second, head drooping, like a snapped stalk of wheat. The punishment wasn't just his. The entire group ran laps until half of you were coughing up bile. Afterward, no one said a word to him for 2 weeks. That silence was more brutal than any whip. You learn fast that your survival depends not just on your strength, but on keeping everyone else strong too. No stragglers, no weakness, not because you're kind, because you're all chained to the same fate. Still, moments slip through. Quiet moments where something tender, almost human, appears. Like when Diodorus, who hasn't smiled in 4 years, cracks a joke about your hair being so tangled it could catch arrows. Everyone laughs, even the instructor, who immediately looks angry about it. Or when Leon, the best runner among you, sprains his ankle during a long-distance march, and you all slow down just enough to hide it. That's how this brotherhood works. Toughness laced with subtle mercy, but only when no one's watching. And yes, sometimes mercy takes a backseat to outright violence. Fights still break out. Not friendly sparring matches, but real bone-breaking brawls. The kind you learn to finish fast, before the instructors get involved. One time a boy accuses another of stealing his cloak. They settle it the Spartan way, bare fists behind the barracks. No one stops them. It ends when one of them spits blood and offers the other his untouched dinner ration. Argument over. Friendship oddly sealed. But here's the wild fringe detail. There's reason to believe that some of these bonds went even deeper. Some historians argue that older Spartan men were encouraged to form intimate, sometimes romantic relationships with younger trainees, not purely out of affection, but as a method of mentorship, loyalty, and yes, military cohesion. The logic being, would you run away and battle if the man beside you was not just your comrade but your heart? Of course this is debated. Some scholars insist these relationships were purely platonic, while others argue the Spartans didn't draw the same hard lines modern cultures do. What we do know is this. Emotional bonds between warriors were sacred, and the Agoge was built to forge them one way or another. You're not sure where you fall on that spectrum. Maybe you've felt it, a deeper pull toward one of your brothers in arms. Maybe you've buried it, or maybe you're just too numb now to know the difference. All you know is this: if someone hurts one of yours, you don't think, you react. That's what they've trained into you. And here's your historical fact: the Syssitia wasn't just a training tool, it was a lifelong obligation. Even full Spartan citizens, grown men with wives and land, were required to eat daily with their dining group. Failure to do so without a valid reason could result in disgrace, or worse. Your meals were your loyalty. Your seat at the table was proof you still belonged. That's the part that rattles in your skull at night, when the fire dims and the whispers fade. You've spent most of your life fighting for your place at a table that serves vinegar blood stew and demands silence. And yet, if that seat were ever pulled out from under you, you'd feel it like a blade to the gut. One evening, after a brutal day of formation drills and weapon maintenance, you're all given a rare reprieve, an evening without orders. It's not quite free time, because that concept doesn't exist here, but it's something. You sit under the stars with 3 others, passing a cracked skin of watered-down wine. No one says much. There's nothing to say. But after a few sips, Leandros hums a song. Low, almost inaudible. A marching chant your group learned years ago, back when your voices still cracked with puberty. You all join in without thinking. It's awful, off-key, but it's yours. And for the first time in weeks, something inside you unclenches. Not fully, but just enough. That night you sleep deeper. No dreams, just the comfort of knowing that if the darkness comes, and it always does, you won't face it alone. You'll face it shoulder to shoulder, shield to shield, with the only people in this world who understand what it means to bleed and not break. Not because you're strong, but because you have to be. By now your days blur together, like blood in river water. You wake, you bury it, you train, you bleed, you eat what could generously be described as punishment stew, and then you collapse just long enough to do it all again. But something's shifting. You're no longer a boy crawling through the layers of agony and obedience. You're nearing 20, and the expectations are different now. You're not just being forged, you're being tested to destruction. This phase of your training isn't about proving you can take a punch or follow orders. You've already done that. What you're entering now is endurance, not of the body but of the will. This is where the Agoge decides who gets to graduate into full Spartiate life, and who quietly disappears, forgotten and unmissed. Each day begins before the sun even thinks about showing its face. You rise in total darkness, feet already cold, muscles sore before you even stand. You barely have time to relieve yourself before drills begin. The instructors have stopped shouting. They don't need to anymore. They just watch, judging. You've learned to measure your worth by the tilt of their head, the twitch of a frown. If they nod, it means you didn't screw up. If they blink too slowly, you're running laps until your lungs crawl out of your throat. Running's constant. You run until you forget why you're running. Then you run more. But it's not just aimless suffering. There's a method behind this madness. These sprints build cohesion. You move as a unit. You breathe together. If one of you falters, you all pay. That's the point. The spear drills become war simulations now, brutal, prolonged formations where you march and pivot and brace against imaginary enemies until your legs shake and your arms feel like someone else's. The phalanx formation is the backbone of Spartan warfare. A living wall of shields and spears moving like one enormous armoured creature. Precision matters. So does stamina. Because once that wall collapses, you're not warriors. You're corpses. In these drills, you're not allowed to break formation for any reason. Not to wipe blood from your nose, not to catch your breath, not even if your foot twists and swells up like a ripe melon. One boy collapses mid-drill, faceplant, no warning. You all hold the line. He's dragged out by 2 instructors and doesn't return. No one asks where he went. That's not how this works. Food is no longer rationed by need. It's rationed by performance. The best squads get slightly thicker bread. The worst get watery broth and a reminder that failure is always watching. You've learned to chew slowly, to savour even the illusion of fullness. You once found a roasted beet hidden under a log, probably meant for livestock, and ate it, like a sacred offering. One day, a group of younger trainees is marched in to observe your drills. Their eyes are wide with something that could be awe or terror, probably both. You glance at them only briefly, enough to remember what it was like to be that small, that fragile, that uncertain. You wonder what they see when they look at you. A warrior, a monster, a warning? Here's your historical fact. Spartan warriors were trained in phalanx formation from adolescence. Unlike other Greek city-states, which relied on part-time soldiers or mercenaries, Sparta produced full-time professionals whose entire identity revolved around warfare. They weren't just fighting for Sparta, they were Sparta, embodied in a wall of bronze and discipline. And the fringe detail. Spartans didn't just train for battle, they rehearsed endurance in ways that bordered on absurd. Some drills lasted entire days, pushing trainees to collapse from exhaustion. In one documented case, boys were told to march in circles until their feet bled through their sandals. You don't even have sandals. The scholarly debate here is juicy. Was this sheer physical punishment truly about military efficiency, or was it a psychological test meant to cull even the strong if they lacked mental endurance? Some argue Sparta weeded out talent in favour of obedience. Others claim this is exactly what created their fearsome reputation, a phalanx of not just the strong but the unshakable. You're not sure anymore. You don't feel unshakable. You feel like a candle being held to a bonfire, melting from proximity. Still, there are moments, small victories that keep the fire inside you from flickering out. Like when your instructor pauses behind you, watching your formation hold steady through a rain-drenched night, and simply says, "Good." Just that. One word, you'll remember it forever. Or the time your squad holds formation the longest during a full-contact mock battle, and afterward, you're handed a hunk of meat the size of your fist. It's barely cooked, probably goat, and you eat it with your bare hands, not caring that it's still pink in the middle. It's the best thing you've ever tasted. You chew slowly, reverently, knowing full well tomorrow you'll be back to barley and blood soup. You're starting to understand something disturbing. You're beginning to like the pain. Not because it feels good, but because it means you're still here, still standing. Every ache is proof of survival. Every new scar is a receipt. Another debt paid to Sparta, and another reason you haven't been discarded. Your hands are scarred and strong now. Your back is a roadmap of healed lashes. Your shoulders never hunch. Your eyes are hard but not empty. Not yet. But the line between who you were and what you've become is getting thinner. Sometimes you catch your reflection in a puddle and don't recognize the man looking back. His jaw is sharper. His gaze is flat. He doesn't blink much anymore. And the worst part? You know he's not finished becoming whatever it is Sparta is shaping him into. Not yet. You're 20 now. Congratulations, sort of. That number means something here. Not in the celebratory let's have a party and blow out candles kind of a way. No. 20 in Sparta means you're no longer considered a boy, you're officially a man, or more specifically a hoplite, a full-fledged soldier in the Spartan army. You've passed the Agoge, survived the krypteia, and proven yourself in every horrible, soul-grinding way they could think of. And now Sparta hands you your reward. A spear, a shield, a new life, and another set of impossible expectations. There is no ceremony, no family feast, no you made it. You're simply handed your gear and told to report to your secession, your dining mess. Now not just a training group, but your permanent battle unit. These are the men you'll eat with, drill with, march with, and die with, ideally. Because remember, Sparta doesn't believe in cowards or survivors, only those who stand their ground. You're given your doru, the traditional spear of a hoplite. It's long, heavy, and perfectly balanced. You've trained with wooden versions for years, but this one's real. The iron head gleams in the sun, and the weight of it feels permanent, like it's not just a weapon, but an extension of your soul. Along with it, you receive a short sword, a Cephas, curved and cruel-looking, for when battles get too close for spears. And then there's the shield, your aspis, the one you've always feared and worshipped. Round, bronze, concave, as heavy as shame and twice as unforgiving. That shield is your identity now. It's more important than your armour, more sacred than your family. If you lose it in battle, you're done, not because the state will kill you, though it might, but because your comrades will never speak your name again. A Spartan returning without his shield is a man who ran, and there's no fate more shameful. Your mother may have told you once with the rarefying mix of love and severity Spartan women are known for, come back with your shield, or on it. Now you finally understand what she meant, and more importantly, you understand she wasn't being poetic. That was a literal order. Your historical fact for tonight: hoplites were the backbone of the Spartan military. Each carried a shield, a spear and a sword forming the infamous phalanx, an impenetrable wall of bronze and discipline. Every man had a designated place in the formation. No freelancing, no flair. Just unbreakable cohesion. the kind that could smash through enemy lines or hold a mountain pass for days. But here's the twisted little fringe detail. The Spartans didn't just train for war, they lived it. From the age of 7, everything in their life pointed toward that moment of standing in a phalanx. Even their songs were war chants. Their dances, battle footwork, their poetry, odes to slaughter. Imagine being so deeply marinated in warfare that you start dreaming in formations. That brings us to the scholarly debate. Did the Spartan military system actually produce the best soldiers in Greece, or just the most obedient ones? Some historians argue Spartans were overrated, rigid, inflexible, and hopeless without their phalanx. Others say they were the finest warriors the ancient world ever saw, capable of holding off armies 10 times their size, but no one debates this. They were terrifying, and they never broke formation. You train differently now. The instructors don't scream anymore. You're expected to know what to do. Everything from spear drills to hand signals to battlefield silence, it's all second nature. You drill daily with your succession, perfecting your movements so the entire unit seems to breathe and bleed as one. You're also sleeping in different quarters now, with the full men. Not better quarters, just more crowded and even sweatier, and the hierarchy shifts again. No longer the youngest, you now share space with men in their 30s, even 40s. Veterans who've seen real battles, who've buried friends and returned with blood still drying under their armour. They don't treat you like a peer yet, not until you prove yourself in actual combat. Until then, you're still just a new blade, sharpened but untested. You get your first taste of true readiness one early morning when the horn sounds before dawn, loud and urgent. No warning, no briefing. You grab your gear like you've done it in your sleep, and you basically have. You form up with your squad, shields locked, spears upright. There's a moment of breathless tension before the commander informs you it's just a readiness drill. A test, but it's also a lesson. You're expected to be prepared at every moment, to rise from sleep into battle formation without hesitation. One day it won't be a test. One day the horn will blow and you'll be marching to war. That realization clings to you like sweat for the rest of the day. War isn't a theory anymore. It's a heartbeat away. You've trained for it, lived for it, bled for it. But there's still that sliver of something, or war maybe, not of dying exactly. You've seen enough death to be familiar with it. No, it's the fear of failure, of running, of being the weak link that breaks the phalanx. That night, during mess, one of the veterans shares a story, quietly in that gruff, offhand way Spartans tell legends. It's about a young soldier who panicked during a skirmish, turned and ran. He was found later in a ditch, alive, but his name was never spoken again. His mother reportedly cursed his birth, and his succession refused to acknowledge him. He wandered Sparta like a ghost, shunned by all, and eventually starved outside the city gates. No one laughs. The room is dead quiet. Even the clinking of bowls stops. The message is clear. You don't run. You don't drop your shield. You fight until you're carried home on it. Later you oil your gear by firelight, checking for cracks, sharpening your spear point, polishing your shield. You catch your reflection in the bronze curve, your face hard and distant, eyes sunken but steady. You're not a trainee anymore. You're a hoplite, a warrior of Sparta. And war is coming. They call it drill, but what it really is, what it's always been, is rehearsal for death. And now that you're part of the phalanx, everything you do is in service of the formation. You don't just train to fight, you train to become a seamless moving wall, a breathing bronze beast with many arms, many eyes, and no hesitation. If you thought the Agoge was cruel, the phalanx is crueler, but in a quiet, mathematical way. There's no yelling now, no lashes, just this cold pressure of knowing that a single misstep could get the man beside you killed. The first time you step into the formation with your full set of gear, the weight of it nearly crushes you. The aspis, the great round shield, pulls your left arm down like a boulder chained to your bicep. The spear, nearly 8 feet long, requires both precision and balance. And your helmet, bronze, domed, sits on your skull like a furnace with eye slits. Once it's on, you can't hear much. You definitely can't see much. All you have is the rhythm of feet beside you and the grunt of the commander's orders, half swallowed by the echo inside your skull. Your first real phalanx drill is chaos disguised as discipline. You lock shields, your left edge overlapping the right of the man beside you. You feel the vibration when his shield smacks into yours. That's the point. Each man is responsible not just for himself, but for the man to his left. You are, in the most literal sense, each other's cover. If one of you falls or retreats, the entire line wobbles, and if the line wobbles in battle, it breaks. If it breaks, you die. The command comes, sharp and cold, advance. Dozens of you take a step forward, left feet first, shields up, spears angled. The rhythm is hypnotic. Step, brace, breathe, step again. You push against your own exhaustion, against the heat trapped in your helmet, against the fear that any wrong movement could expose the man beside you. You don't speak, you don't think, you just move. And then comes the clash. A row of dummy targets simulates the enemy. The front line drives forward, shields slamming hard, spears punching through straw dummies like skewers through meat. You hear grunts, real ones this time, not from pain but from the pure guttural release of impact. The line holds, you hold, and the instructors say nothing, but they don't stop you either, which is as close to praise as you'll ever get. Later, your arms are trembling from the weight of your gear. Sweat drips down your spine, pooling at the small of your back. Your fingers feel dislocated, and you haven't smiled in so long you've forgotten how it's supposed to work. But still, you feel something under all that fatigue. A strange flicker of pride. Not in yourself exactly, but in the formation. The way it moved, the way it held. It's the closest thing to safety you've felt in your entire life. Here's your historical fact. The Spartan phalanx was one of the most feared military formations in history. Tightly packed rows of soldiers moved in coordinated steps, locking shields and thrusting spears in unison. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't romantic, but it was devastatingly effective. Enemies who charged it often broke against it like waves on stone. Now, your quirky fringe fact. Spartans trained to march to music, specifically the aulos, a reed flute that played during drills and battle alike. Why? Because rhythm created cohesion. Even in the heat of battle, Spartans moved to the beat. Think about that. You're storming into a wall of arrows and screaming Persians while listening to what amounts to ancient Greek jazz flute. Somehow it works, but not all scholars agree on how unstoppable the phalanx really was. Some argue that while Sparta excelled in short direct engagements, it struggled in more flexible, unpredictable conflicts. The rigidity that made the phalanx powerful also made it vulnerable if disrupted. It was discipline on a knife's edge. Once the rhythm broke, so did the line. You wonder about that. What happens if you break? Not just physically, but mentally. What if one day your grip slips, or your legs buckle, or you simply lose the will to keep the line? You've seen it in training before, a moment of panic in a younger soldier, a small step backward, a flinch. The instructors don't punish the flinch, they punish everyone else around it. Because the phalanx doesn't forgive mistakes, it multiplies them. There's no room for individual heroics either. That romantic idea of charging ahead, sword flashing, slaying 10 men on your own? Not here. In Sparta you don't leap out of line, you don't stand out, you stand together, or you fall. The man who breaks rank, even to save a wounded friend, is no hero. He's a liability, and liabilities are purged. It's a lesson drilled into you so deeply it becomes muscle memory. Even in your dreams you march in step. You thrust. You lock shields. Sometimes you wake up with your arm curled like it's still gripping a spear, hand frozen around an imaginary shaft. One evening you find yourself repairing your shield in silence, sitting under a torch outside the barracks. The bronze dented earlier in training when you caught the edge of another man's aspis during a formation shift. You hammer it smooth, slowly, methodically. It feels intimate, almost sacred. This shield, heavy and battered and sweat-stained, has become more than gear. It's a symbol of trust, of duty, of 1,000 silent contracts between you and the men beside you. Your fingers run over its rim, checking the leather straps, tightening the grip. You think again of your mother's words, with your shield or on it. You used to hear them as a warning. Now they sound like a benediction. You're no longer training for war, you're living inside it. Every movement, every meal, every breath you take is shaped by the expectation that at any moment the real thing will come, and when it does, you'll either stand your ground or disappear into the dust beneath someone else's sandals. You live in the barracks now, not like before. This isn't the Agoge's grim dormitory of boys breaking into men. This is the adult version, where Spartan men spend most of their lives, regardless of age or rank. Even if you're married, which some of your comrades are, you don't live at home. That's not allowed. Your duty is to the state, to your succession, and to the brutal rhythm of communal military life. Your wife, if you have one, sees you in the dark, maybe. If she's lucky, if you're luckier. The barracks are louder than they used to be. Not chaotic, Spartans don't do chaos, but buzzing with the tension of men who know they're sharpening themselves for something real. The air always smells like oil, sweat, and the faint funk of aiding leather armour. The floor is packed, wall to wall, with bodies and gear. There's barely room to stretch your legs, much less your thoughts. You sleep next to your spear. You wake up tangled in someone's cloak, privacy is a distant dream, like childhood or buttered bread. You eat together, train together, sweat and bleed together. Every meal is part sustenance, part strategy session. At the session, you sit shoulder to shoulder on stone benches, passing down hunks of salted pork, bowls of lentils, crusts of barley bread. The food is still simple, still nearly offensive to the concept of flavour, but now you eat with warriors, not boys. These are the men you'll go to war with. These are the men you'll die beside. Your unit commander, a grizzled veteran named Theokritos, with half an ear and a voice like gravel soaked in wine, runs everything like a warship. He trusts you just enough to not double-check your shield every morning. That, in Spartan terms, is basically a hug. You're starting to earn your place here. Not through words. Words mean nothing in the barracks. Only action matters. If you speak too much, you're mocked. If you complain, you're silenced. If you ask for help, you're tested. The barracks are a forge and silence is the hammer. But the strangest thing, you don't hate it. The rhythms of barrack life begin to feel like comfort, predictable, safe, in the same way a cliff is safe, because at least you know where the edge is. You wake, drill, eat, clean, repair gear, drill again, march, then sleep. That's it. No politics, no family drama, no distractions, just the steady hum of military purpose. You get to know the quirks of your unit. Theron sleeps with his eyes open. Nicias snores so loudly that people take turns stuffing cloth in his mouth. Polycrates won't shut up about his pet dog back home, a dog he hasn't seen in 5 years and probably doesn't even remember him. Still, he tells the same 3 stories about it like he's auditioning for a Homeric epic. You laugh, quietly, carefully, and only when no one's watching. Here's your historical fact. Full Spartan citizens, known as Spartiates, were required by law to live in military barracks until the age of 30. Even if they were married, this system kept them immersed in military life and, more importantly, away from softening domestic distractions. The home was for breeding, the barracks were for bonding and killing. And here's your fringe tidbit. Some believe the Spartan barracks operated under a quiet, unofficial hierarchy of reputation. Not just in combat ability, but in stoicism, soul, wit, and cruelty. It wasn't enough to be strong. You had to be Spartan in the eyes of the others, cutting, cold, exact. A single act of mercy or hesitation could stain your image for years. Your survival here wasn't just physical, it was performative. Scholars still debate whether this system produced a truly elite warrior culture, or just emotionally stunted enforcers of a broken ideology. Was barracks life about unity or surveillance? Did it build trust, or just suppress dissent until it festered? Some say it turned Spartan men into a perfect war machine. Others say it turned them into shells of people, incapable of thinking beyond the phalanx. You're not sure, but you know this. Being alone in Sparta isn't about physical isolation, it's about emotional silence. You're surrounded by men who'd gladly die for you, but who might never speak your name again if you show weakness. Occasionally you get glimpses of life outside the barracks, trips into town for state events, marches through the Agora during religious festivals. You see normal people living normal lives, children laughing, women carrying baskets of figs and olives, old men arguing about crop yields. You feel like a ghost walking among the living. One afternoon you pass a young woman who looks at you, not just through you like most do. She holds your gaze for a second too long. There's curiosity there, maybe recognition. You don't react, you can't, you march on. The barracks may be your cage, but the city outside the bars isn't yours anymore. You've been shaped for something else, something brutal. Back at camp, your commander announces a new drill, an endurance march, full gear, uphill, no water, no breaks. You've done it before, but this time it feels different. He doesn't say why, but the older men look grim, not excited, not challenged, just grim. You all know what it means, your time is coming. You sleep that night on your side, curled slightly, as if you're still bracing for a shield press. Your spear lies next to you, and the leather of your armour presses into your ribs like an old friend you can't stand but can't live without. In the barracks, nothing is ever yours, except your pain, your gear, and your place in the formation. And even those can be taken if you falter, so you grip them tightly, like a man holding onto a ledge, not because he thinks he'll climb up, but because he knows what's waiting if he lets go. There comes a strange shift once you reach full soldierhood, an unexpected detail that feels, frankly, ridiculous after everything you've endured. You're ordered to grow your hair. Yes, your hair. No more close-cropped scalp, no more head shaved for hygiene and uniformity. Now, as a Spartan warrior, you are expected to grow your locks long, not because of fashion, not even to intimidate enemies, though that's definitely a side effect. No, it's tradition. And here in Sparta, tradition might as well be law. At first, the hair just itches. You keep it tied back during drills, plaited tight with leather strips to keep it from blowing in your eyes when the phalanx charges. Still, it feels wrong, un-Spartan even. After years of stripping down everything, comfort, emotion, individuality, growing hair seems dangerously close to self-expression. But Theokritos, your veteran commander, squashes that idea quickly. It is not vanity. It is war paint. You're taught that long hair, properly combed and oiled before battle, shows calm. A man who can stand before death with well-kept hair is a man who fears nothing. That's the lesson. And you follow it. Because in Sparta, presentation isn't about ego, it's about discipline. You're expected to look immaculate in the moments before chaos erupts. So, every morning before drills, you sit with the other men and comb your hair. It becomes a ritual. A silent, oddly meditative moment before the shouting begins. You sit cross-legged on the stone, staring into polished bronze, carefully untangling knots with a small ivory comb. You oil the strands with pressed olives, finger comb it back, then bind it tightly into a warrior's knot at the base of your neck. There's no mirror in the world that can show you how you look, but you feel it. Sharp, serious, ready. You remember the first time you saw the older men doing this as a trainee? You thought it was soft, vain, laughable. But now that you're here, hair slicked back and armour polished, you realise what they were doing wasn't preening. It was preparation, a final act of control before surrendering to the uncontrollable. And the truth is, it works. There's something about the ritual that steadies you. Your mind focuses, your heartbeat slows. By the time you're in formation, you're not just a man, you're a Spartan, and you're terrifying. Here's your historical fact. Spartans were known for their long hair, particularly in adulthood. Plutarch recorded that it was a point of pride for them. They believed long hair made handsome men more striking, and ugly men more fearsome. Before battle, they would comb and oil it carefully, sometimes singing war chants while preparing themselves. It wasn't vanity, it was psychological armour. And your strange little fringe detail. Some reports suggest that before major battles, Spartans didn't just prepare themselves, they also staged brief beauty competitions within their units. Not for glory or romance, but as a reminder, you are not a beast. You're a disciplined, honourable instrument of war. Show it. Wear it. Now for the scholarly debate. What did this focus on personal grooming mean in a society otherwise defined by severity and control? Some argue it was a contradiction, proof that even Sparta couldn't escape human pride. Others claim it was fully in line with Spartan ideology, that the act of maintaining one's appearance was an extension of military discipline. To look perfect while staring death in the eye? That was the most Spartan thing of all. You've started to see how the act becomes part of the armour. Not just the literal bronze on your chest or the iron in your hand, but the calm, practiced mask you wear. When you comb your hair with steady fingers, you tell yourself, I am ready. I am not afraid, I am in control. But sometimes you wonder what lies beneath all the rituals. What's left if you stop combing your hair, if you let your beard go ragged, if you look in the bronze mirror and see not a soldier, but a tired young man with too many scars and a heartbeat that won't slow down. What happens if the mask slips? One evening you catch Theron combing his hair after a rough drill, his lips split, his eyes shadowed, with something that looks too much like grief. He says nothing, just sits by the firelight, combing through the blood-matted curls with a kind of religious focus. No one mocks him. No one speaks. You sit beside him and do the same. That's the rule. Maintain the ritual, especially when everything inside you is screaming. And then comes a morning when the horn blows earlier than usual. You all rise, don your gear, comb your hair quickly, more rushed than usual, but still precise. The commander steps into view, face grim. "Marching orders," he says. "That's it. No explanation. Just 2 words. You know what it means. This isn't a drill. This isn't a test. This is real." You feel your hands start to shake. Just a little. You clench your fingers around the base of your comb until it stops. Then you braid the last of your hair back, slide your helmet under your arm, and rise. This morning you combed your hair with hands that had never held real blood. By tomorrow that might change, but you'll look the part. Because if you're going to die, and in Sparta that's always an option, you'll do it with your hair neat, your shield high, and your soul strapped down tight like a sharpened blade. It happens quickly, the way everything does in Sparta. You're told you've been matched. That's the word they use. Matched. Not courted, not chosen, not swept into a romance under an olive tree. Just matched. Like war horses or chess pieces. Someone somewhere, likely a committee of old men with too many opinions and too few teeth, decided you and she were a good genetic combination. Efficient, strong, Spartan. The wedding is not what you imagined, assuming you ever dared to imagine it. No feasting, no music, no public declarations of love. That's not how it works here. Marriage is private, secretive. Almost a game. Or a hunt. On the appointed night, after the sun has dropped behind the Taygetos mountains, you're taken aside by a fellow soldier and told, "Tonight." That's it. You follow, silent and clean-shaven, dressed in your training cloak. The woman, your wife, whom you've maybe seen once at a festival, maybe not at all, is waiting in a small stone house on the edge of the city. Her head is shaved, not as punishment, but as ritual. In Sparta, women don't veil themselves, but the bride is shorn like a boy to symbolize strength and a shedding of girlhood. She wears a plain tunic. She doesn't speak. You're expected to abduct her, symbolically at least. You pick her up, gently, awkwardly, and carry her into the shadows. She doesn't resist. That's part of the game too. Then, together, you vanish into the dark. It's not romantic. It's strange, quiet, charged with something between tension and duty. There's a fire burning low in the hearth. You're both young, strong, and entirely unprepared for what's supposed to happen next. But this is Sparta. And so you go forward with it. Not with passion, but with purpose. When morning comes, you don't linger. You dress, rebraid your hair, and leave before the rooster even begins his yawn. No breakfast, no long goodbye. You return to the barracks without a word, and no one asks where you've been. Everyone knows, and no one cares. Here's your historical fact. Spartan marriage customs were deliberately strange. Newlywed men were expected to live in the barracks until the age of 30, only visiting their wives in secret at night. The idea was to prevent distraction, to prioritise military duty, and, ironically, to strengthen desire by limiting access. In theory, this made for strong bonds and strong offspring. In practice, it made for a lot of sneaking around and a very strange kind of intimacy. And the fringe fact? Some ancient writers claim that Spartan husbands often didn't recognise their wives during daylight hours for years. So accustomed were they to nighttime visits and dimly lit encounters. It sounds ridiculous until you realise how thoroughly Sparta separated public life from private. Romance wasn't just discouraged, it was actively obstructed. And here's the debate. Was this system a brilliant psychological trick to keep men focused on war? Or was it simply an over-engineered mess that left everyone emotionally starved and secretly confused? Some scholars argue it worked. Spartan society did produce some of the most disciplined warriors and politically engaged women in the ancient world. Others claim it backfired, leading to a fragile, unsustainable population that eventually dwindled out. You wouldn't know. You just know that a few nights a month you slip out of the barracks when you're not on duty and disappear into the shadows again. You return to her, still shorn, still want, though slowly the silence is softening. The second time you visit, she speaks. One word. Your name. That's it. The third time she has wine. Watered down but warm. She pours it without asking and hands you a piece of honeyed bread wrapped in a cloth. It's the best thing you've tasted in years. There's no honeymoon phase, no giddy anticipation of shared futures, but there's a kind of rhythm forming. A kind of trust. You listen when she speaks. She listens when you don't. You don't know if you love her. You don't have time to figure that out. Love here is a luxury, like singing or clean socks, but what you do feel is something sturdy, something quiet. And for now, that's enough. You learn things about her, that her father died in battle near Thermopylae, that she once outran every other girl in her age group at the Festival of Artemis, that she can skin a rabbit faster than anyone you know. She tells you all this while staring at the fire, not at you, and you listen with the kind of reverence usually reserved for commands from your commander. One night she presses a small token into your hand as you're leaving, a carved wooden figure of a lion, roughly made. You don't ask what it means, you just nod and tuck it into your belt. You don't speak of it at the barracks, you don't show it to anyone, but sometimes when your fingers brush it during drills, your grip tightens just a little. Marriage in Sparta is not a sanctuary, it's not an escape, it's not even a partnership, not in the way people elsewhere might think, but it's a thread. And in this city of stone and silence, even a thread can keep you from unravelling. You still live among men, still march, still fight, still sleep on hard ground with your spear across your chest. But now sometimes, in the quiet between drills, your mind drifts. Not far, just to the small stone house near the city edge, to the low firelight, to the shadowed face of someone who speaks your name like it means something. You never say it aloud, but for the first time in your Spartan life, someone is waiting for you. And in a city where no one is allowed to be soft, that feels like a kind of rebellion. You're not allowed to retreat. That's not just military advice, it's the law. Engraved in your training, in your bones, in the silent stares of the older soldiers who've watched too many boys flinch and vanish. The moment you join the Spartan army as a full-fledged warrior, you are bound by a rule so sacred it's practically spiritual. Never turn your back on the enemy. Never run. Never surrender. You either win or you die trying. There's no third option. The concept of tactical retreat, that belongs to lesser city-states. Cowards. Poets. You're a Spartan. You don't go backward. You hear the stories constantly. Whispers in the barracks. Lessons disguised as ghost tales. Like the one about Aristodemos, who got sick right before the Battle of Thermopylae and was sent home. Returned to Sparta alive while the other 299 died in a blaze of legend. He wasn't greeted with relief. He was met with silence, shame. No one spoke to him, no one ate with him. His name became a curse, a living warning. Some say he spent the rest of his life trying to redeem himself, some say he finally did, in a later battle where he charged so hard and fought so wildly that his comrades barely recognised him. Others say he just broke, quietly. So the message is clear. Death is preferable to disgrace. You're reminded of this every day. In drills, where you're forced to hold the front line against waves of oncoming trainees, your shield arm burning, your calves cramping, and the instructors circling like vultures. Anyone who breaks formation, even by a foot, is dragged out and whipped. Not just for training discipline, but to simulate what would happen in real combat. Because out there, on an actual battlefield, breaking the line doesn't mean a scolding, it means a pile of corpses where your phalanx used to be. The punishment for cowardice isn't immediate execution. That would be merciful. It's exile within the city. You stay alive, but no one looks at you. No one eats with you. You're not invited to festivals or hunting trips or family feasts. You walk through the Agora like a ghost, half existing. Even the helots, the enslaved class, pity you. That's how deep the shame runs. Here's your historical fact. Spartans who fled battle were known as tresantes or tremblers. They were publicly shamed, forced to wear special clothing and banned from holding political office or marrying. Their families often disowned them. In a culture that worshipped bravery, trembling in fear was worse than death. And now for your fringe detail. Some say the tremblers weren't even allowed to grow beards. That's right, facial hair as a symbol of honour. Cowards had to shave, leaving their faces smooth and childish, forever marked as men who broke when it counted. Imagine carrying that on your jaw for the rest of your life. The scholarly debate, whether this ruthless system created a superior fighting force, or just a psychologically damaged society obsessed with performance. Some historians argue that this zero-tolerance policy made Spartan armies nearly unbeatable. Others suggest it fueled cycles of trauma and denial where soldiers would sooner walk into certain death than admit fear. There's even speculation that some men, when cornered on the battlefield, chose suicide over the chance of survival and disgrace. You think about all this during a weapons inspection. You're sitting in the dirt outside the barracks, oiling your spearhead. The blade gleams in the morning light. You imagine holding it in a real battle, facing an enemy who outnumbers you 10 to 1. Will you stand? Will your legs lock, your shield raise, your arm thrust forward with the force you've been training for all these years? Or will some hidden part of you, the human part, beg you to run? You look up at the line of veterans sharpening their blades nearby. Faces carved from stone, eyes that have seen blood and fire and still blink slowly, like none of it matters. You wonder how many of them felt fear and pushed through it. You wonder how many didn't. Because no one talks about fear in Sparta. It's not allowed. If you admit to it, even in a whisper, you're already halfway to becoming a trescent. So instead, you joke, quietly, sarcastically, in the way soldiers have always done, when death is close but not quite here. One night during evening drills, a new recruit trips during a shield drill and falls flat on his face. He doesn't cry, he doesn't even groan. He just lies there, breathing hard while the instructor walks over and places a boot gently on his back. "Will you stand and fight?" the instructor asks. The boy nods. "Then do it, or lie there forever." The boy gets up. That's the only acceptable ending to the story. You carry these lessons with you, tucked into your mind like the small blade you hide behind your shield strap. Silent, sharp, always ready. You don't know when your first real battle will be, but you know what's expected of you when it comes. You imagine it now, the heat of the sun on your armour, the roar of men charging, the clash of bronze and flesh. You won't retreat, you won't even look back, because in Sparta honour is a direction, forward. And if your body fails you, if a sword finds your ribs or an arrow punches through your thigh, you know what to do. You fall in place, not screaming, not fleeing, just quietly collapsing into the dirt, your shield still raised, your hair still braided, your name still intact. Because the only way out is forward. Or not at all. You don't think about the helots much. You're not supposed to. They're just there, like rocks or wind or barley fields. Background to Spartan life. They till the land, cook the meals, dig the trenches, haul the stones. Without them, Sparta would collapse within a week. But you're trained not to see them as people, at least not in the way you see your brothers in arms. The helots are tools, shadows, a population both essential and disposable. And the most terrifying thing? You've learned to accept it without thinking. The helots outnumber you. Everyone knows it. Some say 7 to 1, others say 10, it doesn't matter. The point is, they could crush Sparta if they ever decided to rise up all at once, so the state keeps them scared, quiet, subdued through a steady stream of threats, restrictions, and sometimes just pure psychological warfare. Every autumn, when the E4s declare war on them formally, legally, men like you are allowed to kill them without consequence. You don't even have to pretend it was self-defense. The killing is the defense. It keeps the population under control. That's the theory. You've participated in some of it, even if indirectly. The midnight patrols, the whispered orders, the occasional sudden disappearance of a helot who looked at the wrong soldier the wrong way. You don't ask questions, because asking too many questions in Sparta is a bad habit, like blinking too much or caring too loudly. Still, the system doesn't sit clean in your bones, not always. One day, during a forced labour assignment near the Eurotas River, you watch an old helot woman hauling 2 buckets of water, her spine curved like a broken bow. She trips, falls face first into the mud. Her hands twitch like she wants to cry out, but she doesn't. She knows better. You want to help her up. You do nothing. You keep marching, because that's how it works. The entire society is balanced on a knife's edge, Spartans on top, helots below. You were trained to believe this is natural, even divine, that the gods made Sparta strong and made the helots weak for a reason. But in your quieter moments, rare and risky as they are, you wonder if that's just something the strong tell themselves to feel better about the boot on someone else's neck. Here's your historical fact. The helots were an enslaved population primarily made up of the people originally conquered by the Spartans in Laconia and Messenia. They weren't sold in markets or chained in mines like chattel slaves in other societies. They were bound to the land and expected to provide the majority of the food and resource sources that kept the Spartan state alive, and their lives were carefully regulated through violence and fear, the fringe detail. Every year, as part of the krypteia, selected Spartan youths were sent into helot villages to kill any who appeared too confident, too strong, too organised. It wasn't just about punishing rebellion, it was about preventing hope. The state didn't want to fight a war against the helots. It wanted to make sure one never started. And the debate? Whether the helot system was sustainable or a ticking time bomb. Some scholars argue it was Sparta's fatal flaw, a society that spent so much time and energy suppressing its own labour force that it couldn't adapt or evolve. Others claim it worked remarkably well for centuries, providing the Spartans with a unique ability to specialise in warfare while everyone else chased wealth or culture. You don't know where you stand. You don't have the luxury of a philosophical position. You just know that one night during a storm you're posted to a watch station outside the city walls. The rain is coming down sideways, soaking in your cloak and dripping into your boots. A helot boy, maybe 12, approaches the outer gates carrying a basket of grain. He's shaking. You raise your spear and signal for him to halt. He stops, lowers the basket, and kneels, shoulders tight like he's waiting for pain. You don't speak, you wave him through. No ceremony, no eye contact. He scurries away like a ghost trying not to wake the dead. You don't tell anyone. That moment stays tucked behind your ribs, alongside a dozen others you're not allowed to admit happened. Tiny betrayals of the system. Tiny stabs of something dangerously close to empathy. But you're still a Spartan. You still drill, still shout war chants, still polish your armour and speak only when necessary. You have to. You can't afford to think too hard about the foundations holding everything up. Because if you start to question the cruelty, you might begin to see its cracks. And if you see the cracks, you might fall through them. One night, back at the barracks, Theokritos tells a story during mess about a helot revolt that happened decades ago. They were brave, he says, but not smart. The room goes quiet. Bravery without power is just suicide. The older men nod. You pretend to nod too. You lie awake longer that night, the rain tapping against the wooden beams above you, the smell of wet earth leaking in through the cracks in the wall. You think about the boy at the gate, the old woman in the mud, the strange knowledge that your life depends on the suffering of people you're not allowed to speak to. You don't sleep well, but the next morning you rise early, comb your hair, and march to drill like nothing happened. Because that's what Spartans do. Religion in Sparta doesn't feel like comfort. It's not sanctuary or peace or a warm hall where you light candles and whisper prayers. No one here drops to their knees in humble silence. Religion in Sparta feels like a contract, a blood-signed agreement between you and a pantheon that demands discipline, loyalty, and sacrifice. You don't worship to be saved. You worship to prove you're worthy of drawing breath in a city built on endurance and pain. The gods are everywhere, carved into stone on every street, painted in fading reds and blacks across aging temple walls. Your commanders invoke them constantly. Before meals, before battle drills, before punishments. It's always by Ares, or by Athena's spear, or may Apollo blind our enemies. They are not gods you love, they're gods you respect, because the moment you don't, you get the unsettling feeling they'll notice, and crush you. Rituals are laced into every aspect of your life. You sacrifice to Artemis Orthia before war games. You whisper to Zeus before a long march. You never forget to honour the twin gods, Castor and Pollux, patron sons of Sparta, whose mythic deeds hang over your head like a standard too high to reach. They're the blueprint, really. Immortal brothers who never wavered, never ran. You don't worship them because they're perfect. You worship them because you're trying and failing to be like them. But some of the rituals get darker, stranger, more violent. Like the festival of Artemis Orthia, a spectacle everyone in Sparta gathers to witness. Young boys, barely into the Agoge, are whipped at the altar, not lightly. We're talking flayed backs, blood on stone, screams swallowed by the crowd. It's not a punishment. It's a show, a test. They call it the diamastagosis. The boys compete to see who can endure the longest without crying out. The crowd cheers, elders nod in approval, women whisper about who shows the most promise. You remember watching it when you were younger. Your first year in the Agoge. You stood in the front row, fists clenched, stomach tight. One boy, Thrasos, lasted longer than anyone. Blood ran in rivers down his legs. He passed out in the dust with a grin on his face. He didn't wake up. No one said his name again. But everyone remembered him. Now you're older. You don't watch the festival. You guard it. You stand near the altar with your unit, shields in hand, spears planted in the earth, faces unreadable. You're not there to stop anything, you're there to make sure nothing interrupts it. That's your job now, to protect the rituals, no matter how savage they seem. Here's your historical fact. The Diamastigosis was a real Spartan rite of passage held at the Temple of Artemis Orthia. Boys were whipped in front of the community, sometimes to death. It was considered a test of endurance, toughness, and divine favour. The Romans later watched it like a sport. Fringe fact? Some say the whipping wasn't originally part of the ritual. Early versions were just dances and offerings, but over time, possibly due to social pressure, or the creeping influence of increasingly militaristic ideals, it morphed into a blood rite. The Spartans unsurprisingly leaned into that evolution with enthusiasm. The scholarly debate? Whether these rituals were truly about pleasing the gods, or simply another layer of psychological warfare. Some believe they were engineered to reinforce discipline through divine fear. Others think the religion was just another tool of the state, hollowed out and rebuilt to serve Sparta's real gods, control and obedience. You'd love to say you know the answer, but you don't. All you know is that you pray constantly, and not always with words. Sometimes it's just a breath held before a drill, a whispered name into your cloak before a march. You never admit what you're doing. Faith is private here, like grief or hunger. It lives in the cracks, in the silence between the shield clashes. You've even visited Delphi once during a long-range training mission. The Oracle's cave, all sulphur and shadow, buzzed with a kind of raw ancient power. Your commander spoke to her, asked something no one repeated afterward. She babbled in riddles, her eyes rolled back, her body twitching like a puppet. You don't know what she saw, but when he returned he looked older, as if time had taken a bite out of him. Later you asked the Akritos if he believed in the gods. He stared at you for a long moment, then said, "Only when I lose." You weren't sure if it was a joke, but belief has its uses, even here. Before battle drills, you and your unit sing the paean, the slow, steady hymn to Apollo. It centers you, anchors your breathing. You raise your shield in time with the chant, the words dulling the noise in your head. For a few moments you forget that you're one mistake away from disgrace. You are just another voice, humming into the olive-scented wind. Some men pray for glory, others for death. You pray for stillness, for quiet, for just one night where your dreams aren't flooded with shouting and bronze. That prayer hasn't been answered yet. One night, you slip away from the barracks for a moment, just to breathe. You walk to the edge of the city where the trees gather thick and dark. You light a small fire and sit alone. No ritual, no sacrifice, just silence. You whisper to Artemis, the huntress, the protector of the night, not for victory, not even for strength. You just say, "Let me make it through tomorrow." And somehow that feels like enough. There are men who lead in Sparta, and then there are those who speak for the gods. And those aren't always the same men. You may train your whole life with spear and shield, but no matter how sharp your instincts, how brutal your discipline, one thing can stop an entire Spartan army from moving forward. A woman in a cave, high on fumes, muttering riddles that no one dares ignore. The Oracle at Delphi. She's not a Spartan. She doesn't wear armour or wield a sword. She wears flowing robes and sits above a pit in the earth, breathing in the gas that leaks from its unseen mouth. She doesn't shout or scold, she just speaks, cryptic, slurred, sometimes terrifying, yet her words move nations, and when she speaks, even the hardest warrior lowers his eyes. In Sparta, you're told to obey your elders, your commanders, your laws, and your gods, but when war is on the horizon, it's the Oracle's voice that carries the final word. No campaign begins without her. No major battle is joined unless her omens are clear. It's not tradition, it's strategy. Because when you fight with Sparta at your back and Apollo in your ears, you move like fate itself is pushing you forward. The first time you see her, you're part of an escort, selected to accompany a delegation to Delphi ahead of a potential campaign. Rumours swirl of Persian movement in Ionia, and the ephors want guidance. You march for days, across rough hills and twisted forests, through blinding dust and summer heat, until Delphi rises like a phantom from the stones. The Temple of Apollo looms above you, white columns bright against the sky. You're not allowed inside, only the high priests and the Spartan elders, but you wait nearby among the others, weapons across your knees, watching the columns shimmer in the heat like they're about to peel away from reality. When they emerge hours later, the delegation is pale, sweating, not from the climb, Spartans don't sweat over geography, But from whatever they heard down in that smoky cave, they say the oracle didn't answer directly. She never does. But the gods spoke. Or maybe they didn't. It's hard to tell. That's the power she holds. Her prophecies come wrapped in metaphor, like riddles hiding blades. Beware the wooden walls. Only a king's blood can save you. Victory comes to the patient sword. They sound like nonsense until they're not. Your historical fact, the oracle at Delphi known as the Pythia, was a real and deeply feared presence in the ancient world. Greek leaders consulted her before making critical decisions, especially about war. Even Sparta, for all its disdain of external influence, bent the knee to her words. She was believed to channel Apollo directly, her utterances transcribed by priests who clarified her meaning, assuming anyone ever truly could. Fringe fact. Recent studies suggest that the Pythia may have genuinely been high, literally. Scientists believe the temple was built over a fault line that emitted ethylene or methane gas, which could induce hallucinations, euphoria, and trance-like states. So yes, the woman shaping the decisions of entire empires may have been floating in a chemically induced haze, which somehow makes everything make more sense. Scholarly debate swirls around the oracle's political power. Some argue she was a puppet, controlled by temple priests or political elites. Others claim her influence was real and profound, that her authority stemmed not just from mysticism, but from the fact that no one, not even the mighty Spartans, wanted to risk ignoring a divine warning. In a world where omens could turn the tide of battle, her ambiguity was her strength. You don't know what the oracle said that day, but back in Sparta the air changes. The elders meet behind closed doors more often. The commanders sharpen their tone during drills. A quiet, tightening tension curls around the city like a drawn bowstring. You're told to increase your readiness, to polish your gear every night, to sleep lightly, to eat quickly, orders are shorter, tempers flare faster, something's coming, and then one day you overhear a phrase that chills you deeper than any winter wind. Thermopylae. You know the name, everyone does. It's where the Great Stand happened, Leonidas and the 300, a place soaked in blood and glory, a pass where Spartans became legends by holding the line against a sea of Persians for 3 days. They all died. You've been taught since childhood that it was beautiful, sacred, necessary. But you've also been taught that none of them hesitated, not one. Now they're saying another force might be sent there, soon. You find yourself awake in the middle of the night, lying on the hard floor of the barracks, staring at the ceiling, wondering if fate is pointing its bony finger at you. You try not to think about what you'd do if you were sent, whether you'd die well, whether you'd even have a choice. You remember the oracle's words, Hans whispered years ago, recorded in your training scrolls. The greatest glory is found at the narrow gates. You used to think that meant honour. Now it sounds like a tombstone. The next day, Theokritos gathers you and your unit. We're not moving yet, he says, but the oracle has spoken. We prepare. No one cheers, no one flinches. You all just nod, because that's what Spartans do. You spend the rest of the day sharpening your weapons in total silence, and that night, while the city sleeps, you sit under a tree on the outskirts of the barracks and look up at the stars. The same stars that shone down on Leonidas, the same ones that watched over Delphi, the same ones that might blink down on your bones one day if the oracle gets her way. You whisper nothing, no prayers, no hopes, just a breath, a pause. Then you return to your cot, lay down your head, and sleep like a man preparing to vanish. They say that once you march to Thermopylae, you don't come back. Not really. Maybe your body returns if the gods are feeling generous, but your mind, your soul, those are left behind, fused into the rocks and ash and history itself. And now here you are, marching north with your unit, one foot in front of the other, through the winding hills and sun-cracked plains, heading toward the narrow pass that turned your forebears into legends and corpses in the same breath. You weren't told outright. The commanders don't announce these things with flair. There's no fanfare, no call to glory, just a single order barked before dawn. Pack lightly, full gear. We march. The tone tells you what the words don't. You leave the barracks quietly. Your wife doesn't know. There's no time to farewell. Just a final glance at the city's skyline as it shrinks behind you. The great mountains standing sentinel, the rooftops glowing soft in the rising sun. You take one last deep breath of the air you've trained in, bled in, grown up in. Then you face forward. The march is grueling, but no one complains, not even the younger men. Your boots slap dust from the road in rhythm with your heart. Your shield bangs lightly against your back with every step. The sun climbs, sweat drips into your eyes. You wipe it away with the back of a calloused hand. The sound of armour, bronze clinking against bronze, is a constant chorus. When you rest, it's for minutes at a time. Enough to refill your canteen, check your gear, maybe pass a few words to the man beside you. Then it's up again, moving, always forward. By the third day, your legs ache in a way that feels permanent. Your thighs burn like iron in a forge, but you keep going. Because that's the only thing you can do. There's no choice, no alternative. You signed that contract with your first breath in Sparta, and somewhere deep in your brain, under the layers of discipline and silence and history, you know what's waiting at the end of this road. Thermopylae, the hot gates, a strip of land so narrow you could block it with your shield if you stood just right. On one side, the mountains rise like the spines of a sleeping beast. On the other, the sea churns dark and deep. You reach it at dawn on the 5th day. The sky's pink and gold, the cliffs glowing like molten stone. You expected it to feel bigger, but it's small, humble, almost quiet, like a grave that forgot to be buried. You make camp at the same place where Leonidas made his, the very same. The hill is still scorched, the soil still dark. You run your fingers through it and swear you can smell smoke. You're told not to rest too much. There's training to do. The Persian threat is growing again. Fleet movements, scout sightings, whispers from the north. Nothing confirmed, but enough to justify readiness. Enough to justify the ghosts. You drill every day. Spears in hand, shields locked. Feet planted into ground soaked with the memory of blood. Your commander walks the ranks slowly, eyeing your posture, your timing. Remember where you stand, he says, and who stood here before you. You don't need reminding. You think about them constantly, the 300. The way they fought until their blades shattered, until their arms gave out, until there was nothing left but breath. And even that, they gave up without regret. Here's your historical fact. The Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BCE was one of the most famous last stands in history. 300 Spartans, along with a few thousand allies, held off a vastly larger Persian force for 3 days. They knew they wouldn't survive. That wasn't the point. The point was to delay, to defy, to become immortal through the act of resistance itself. And here's your fringe detail. Some reports say that just before the final assault, the Spartans combed their hair. Carefully, calmly, knowing they would die. They didn't do it for vanity. They did it to show the Persians that they feared nothing, not even the end. A final act of control in the face of chaos. Scholars still argue about what the Spartans were thinking. Was it blind obedience? Strategic sacrifice? Glorious suicide? Some say they wanted death, to die in the perfect formation, to leave behind a story carved into stone. Others say they were trapped by their own myth, unable to retreat because they trained themselves into a corner. Maybe both. Maybe neither. You're standing there now, staring at the same pass, wondering what kind of man you are. You don't know yet, and that terrifies you. At night, around the low campfires, you and your brothers speak quietly, if at all. One asks what you think it'll feel like when the arrows come. Another jokes about hoping he dies with his mouth open so he can catch one. Laughter breaks the silence, thin and nervous. You don't join in. You're staring at your spear, at the scratches on the shaft, the way the blade catches the firelight. You whisper to yourself, I will not run. It's not bravado. It's a promise, a spell. You say it over and over, like a mantra. Not because you're brave, but because you're scared, and this is how you hold the fear down. You lie on the hard ground, your cloak pulled tight around your shoulders. Your shield is tucked beneath your head. The stars are too bright, too cold. You feel the weight of history pressing down on you like a second layer of armour. And then you hear it. Faint, distant, but real. The sound of ships on the water. They're coming. You survive the battle. That's the first problem. You're not supposed to, not at Thermopylae. Thermopylae is where men become memories, where their bones feed legends and their names get carved into stone. But the morning after the final clash, when the shouting stops and the smoke fades and the blood dries into rust on your shield, you're still breathing. Your knees buckle, your hands shake, your ears ring like temple bells, but you're alive. And in Sparta, that's complicated. It wasn't like the stories. No dramatic charge into overwhelming odds, no poetic one-liner before death. It was chaos, mud, screams, and still. The Persians came in waves, endless and faceless, their arrows blotting the sky, their spears like wind-blown reeds. You fought for hours, shoulder to shoulder with your brothers, your shield arm going numb, your spear slick with the blood. You watched Theron fall beside you, his throat open and steaming in the morning sun. You watched Nikias lose a hand and keep fighting. You thought you'd go with them, but you didn't. You don't even remember how you got out. The command came retreat to a secondary position. Temporary, tactical, buy time. You obeyed. You didn't hesitate. You carried a wounded soldier, someone you barely knew, up a slope away from the worst of it. The rest of your unit followed. It wasn't desertion, it was order. Clean, direct, barked over the clash of shields. And yet, now you're back in Sparta, and they're not. There's no parade waiting for you, no medals, no feast. You return in silence, marching through the city gates with dried blood caked on your armour, and 1,000-yard stare burned into your face. People line the roads, but they don't cheer. They watch, measuring, judging, counting how many of you came back and how many didn't. You're told to report to your commander immediately. You do. You stand at attention, posture perfect, wounds still oozing beneath your cloak. He looks at you for a long time. Then he says, "You lived?" You nod. He says, "And ovo bien." You want to say you fought. You want to describe the shield wall holding as the Persian line buckled, how you saw a chariot rider lose his head from a single stroke of your sword. You want to say that you stayed until the last command, that you carried out the wounded, that you held your ground, but you don't. You just say, "I did not retreat." He stares at you like he's weighing that sentence in his palm. Then he nods once, slowly. You'll need to prove that. Here's your historical fact. Spartan warriors who survived major battles, especially infamous ones like Thermopylae, were often treated with suspicion. The cultural expectation was death in battle. Anything less raised questions. Had you fled? Had you been lucky? Had you simply hidden beneath the bodies of braver men? In a society built on the myth of the perfect warrior, survival often smelled like failure. Now your fringe detail. In at least one documented case, a Spartan who returned from Thermopylae was ostracized so completely that he left the city to live in exile, voluntarily. He couldn't bear the silence, the averted eyes, the shame that clung to him like smoke. Some say he eventually took his own life. Others say he wandered into another battle, desperate for a clean death. And the debate? Whether Spartan treatment of survivors was a functional deterrent to cowardice, or a cruel, self-defeating system that punished men for doing exactly what soldiers are supposed to do. Survive and protect their comrades. Some argue it instilled unmatched loyalty. Others believe it broke the psyches of countless men, leaving them husks in their own homeland. You feel like a husk now. You return to the barracks, your cot is untouched. The others stare, some with hollow eyes, others with unreadable expressions. You're not welcomed back. You're not kicked out either. You just exist, like a statue someone forgot to finish. At the mess, no one sits beside you. Not out of malice, out of uncertainty. No one knows what to make of you yet. You're a living reminder that death didn't want everyone. Your wife doesn't say anything either. When you sneak back to her house at night, she opens the door with her usual quiet gaze, steps aside and lets you in. She brings you wine, bandages your shoulder, and touches the scar on your cheek without a word. You ask her, "Do you think I should have died?" She replies, "You didn't, so don't act like you did." It's the first time anyone's spoken to you like you're still a person. That night, you sit awake long after she sleeps, staring at the embers in the hearth. Your shield leans against the wall, still scuffed, still streaked with blood. You keep touching it, pressing your fingers to the dent where an arrow struck during the second wave. You think about the men who didn't return, about how their names will be chiseled into stone, about how yours won't. You remember the boy you carried. He lived. At least you think he did. You haven't seen him since. Maybe he told someone. Maybe no one believes him. Maybe it doesn't matter. But you're here, and that's the truth you have to carry now. Not glory and not shame, just survival. And in Sparta, that's the heaviest burden of all. Somewhere along the line, the songs start creeping in. Not from you, you're not the singing type, not after all you've seen, but from the others. around the fire at night under their breath while polishing bronze in the back of their throats during long marches. There are old songs, warrior songs, songs about men who fought and died and somehow became something bigger than blood and bones. You know the words. You've known them since childhood, but now they sound different. Not noble, not lofty, just tired. You don't know who starts it, but suddenly poetry's everywhere. Not scrolls or grand recitations. Sparta doesn't do theatre, but snippets, chants, a few lines scratched into a shield's rim with the tip of a dagger, a line muttered before sparring, "Let me fall with my face to the foe," another whispered after a quiet funeral, "Better to die than to yield." You used to think poetry was for Athenians, those sandal-soft, toga-fluttering philosophers who'd rather talk about battle than survive one. But even here, among hard men and harder silence, the need to say something creeps in. The songs aren't just about glory anymore, they're about endurance, about remembering, about not being forgotten in a world that has no time for tears. Some of the older men can quote Tyrtaeus from memory. He was a Spartan poet, one of the few who wrote down what you've all been too proud to admit. War is terrifying. Necessary, yes, honourable maybe, but terrifying. He didn't glorify the blood. He glorified the man who stood firm despite it. His verses weren't about killing. They were about not running. You start muttering his words to yourself during drills. For every man who falls, 100 rise. He who stands firm saves his city and name. You don't say them loud, just enough to remind yourself that someone else once felt the way you do now, cold, cracked open, and desperate to believe that all this pain means something. Here's your historical fact. Sparta revered the poet Tyrtaeus, a 7th century BCE warrior poet whose verses were memorized by every soldier. His poetry emphasized bravery in battle, the shame of cowardice, and the glory of dying in defense of the polis. His words weren't flowery, they were commands dressed as inspiration. Your fringe detail tonight. Spartan warriors sometimes sang in formation, not just chants, but full songs, especially when marching into battle. These weren't casual tunes, they were tactical. The rhythm unified the phalanx, the lyrics reminded each man of who he was and what was expected. You sang not to distract yourself, but to stay focused, centered, defiant. And the debate? Whether Spartan poetry was an authentic emotional outlet, or just another tool of indoctrination. Some historians argue that allowing any artistic expression shows a crack in the armour, proof that Spartans weren't as stoic as their reputation claimed. Others believe the state co-opted poetry to reinforce its values, making even beauty a weapon of war. You find yourself caught between those ideas, because the more you repeat those verses, the more they become a part of your armour, just like your shield or your sword, or the sword or that scar on your ribs. They fill the silence when words fail, when the weight of what you've done and what you haven't done and what you might still have to do presses down like the sky itself. One evening, during a lull between patrols, someone starts singing. You're all sitting in a loose circle, polishing gear, oiling limbs that feel older than they are. The voice is low, gruff, a line from a song you haven't heard since you were a boy. I do not ask for mercy, only memory. You don't join in, not right away, but someone else does. Then another. The melody builds, not loud, not joyful, but steady. A rhythm older than pain. You close your eyes and let it wash over you the way firelight washes over armour. It doesn't fix anything, it doesn't make the ghosts go away, but it reminds you that you're not alone in the remembering. Later, back in your corner of the barracks, you scratch a few lines into the underside of your shield with your dagger. Nothing fancy, not even original, just something from Tyrtaeus. Let him who dares not die be gone. You don't know who'll see it. Maybe no one. Maybe some poor boy 10 years from now, after you've fallen in some nameless field. Maybe he'll run his fingers over the groove and whisper the words to himself the night before his first real battle. Maybe it'll give him something to hold on to. Something that doesn't splinter or shatter. Because here's the truth. Sparta tries to bury beneath its bronze and bone. Even soldiers bleed on the inside. Even warriors need words. And when the blood runs dry, sometimes it's the poetry that survives. You never thought you'd live to see 60. Honestly, you never thought you'd live to see 30. But here you are, grey creeping into your beard, your knees grinding like a millstone, your back crackling every time you so much as lean forward. And yet in Sparta, old age doesn't mean rest. It means something worse: expectation. You're not a young man anymore. You've survived wars, famines, drills so brutal they left grown men weeping into their cloaks. You've outlived your brothers. You've buried them one by one, some on battlefields, some beneath the quiet, unmarked stones outside the city gates. You don't have many left. Just a handful of comrades who sit beside you now at the Gerousia, the council of elders, wearing the same tired look you see in polished bronze every morning. The state gives you a new role, whether you ask for it or not. You are now a geron, an elder, a judge, a teacher, a warning. You sit on benches while young men line up, bruised and bleeding, to be evaluated. Your job is to decide who showed enough grit, who held the shield properly, who deserves punishment, and who might actually live long enough to stand where you are now. You watch them like hawks, silent, hunched, unreadable. The young ones glance at you when they think you're not looking, trying to guess if that old man in the corner still remembers how to kill. You do. Every bone in your body remembers. Your fingers still twitch in formation when you sleep, and when you grip your cane, you do it like a spear. Spartan elders don't retire. You don't fade into leisure, sipping wine in vineyards and reminiscing about the good old days. You serve until death, or until your mind frays and your memory forgets the drills. Even then, they might keep you around just as a symbol. Something for the young ones to fear becoming. But make no mistake, you still train. Maybe not with a full kit, maybe not with 20-mile marches. But you move, you drill, you stretch until your muscles scream. Because in Sparta, even old age is a battlefield. And weakness, at any age, is still a crime. Here's your historical fact. Spartan men, if they lived past 60, were often granted a seat in the Gerousia, the council that shaped policy, advised kings, and acted as a supreme court of sorts. It was one of the few honours not earned by death. You didn't get there just by surviving. You had to be respected, feared, proven. Your fringe detail. Some say the elders still carried weapons, small knives hidden in their robes, not for ceremony, for readiness, because Sparta never believed a man was too old to fight. There's one story of an 80-year-old geron who stabbed an intruder in his sleep before the guard could arrive. The killer? A disgraced trescent come to exact revenge. The elder never missed a night's sleep again. The debate? Whether Sparta truly honoured its elders, or simply kept them around out of necessity. Some argue the Gerousia was an early example of meritocratic respect for wisdom and experience. Others say it was lip service and that elders were used as tools, symbols of discipline trotted out to keep the youth in line and give weight to the laws. You sit now on one of those benches, watching the next crop of boys train with too much energy and not enough caution. You see one hesitate before striking in a sparring match. You shake your head. The instructor notices. The boy is pulled aside. That's how it works. Your glance is a weapon now. Your silence speaks louder than commands. They still make you speak during festivals, though. You're expected to stand and offer words to the crowd, wisdom from a lifetime of war. You hate public speaking, always have, but when the torchlight hits your face and the city goes quiet, you find yourself saying the same thing every year. Strength is not the absence of fear, it is the silence that follows it. You don't even know where the phrase came from anymore. Maybe you stole it. Maybe you lived it. You visit your wife more often now, no longer sneaking out like some lovesick initiate. The law allows you to live with her full-time after 30, but habit dies hard. You still find yourself waking up before dawn, still lacing up sandals like you're heading to drill. She watches with the same amused silence she wore when you were young, only now her hair is streaked with silver, her voice lower, steadier. She's still stronger than you in a dozen quiet ways. One morning she hands you a basket of figs and tells you to take them to a young mother on the edge of the city. Her niece. You do, without question. That's what love looks like here. Not flowers, not poems, just obedience softened by years. You've seen the city change. The boys in the Agoge still cry at night, though they try not to. The songs are the same, but fewer know all the verses. The armour's shinier, the discipline a little looser at the edges. Sparta is still Sparta, but not quite the one you knew. Sometimes you dream of that long march to Thermopylae. You dream of the sound of sandals on dirt, of blood steaming in the morning sun, of men shouting until their throats bled. You wake up with clenched fists and the taste of iron on your tongue. but mostly you wake up just grateful you can still stand. You are a survivor in a city that was never built for survival. A walking contradiction, a ghost in bronze, and somehow, against all odds, you're still here. There's a saying in Sparta that daughters are born of iron. And after everything you've endured, everything you've seen, nothing drives that home harder than trying to raise one. Because now, in the last chapter of your body's strength, in the long echo after the shield and spear have been hung up, you're a father to someone who could very well break you in half. Your daughter is 12 now, tall, sharp-eyed, and louder than a war horn. She doesn't walk, she storms, doesn't ask, she demands. She practices throwing javelins behind the house with frightening accuracy and has already knocked out a boy's tooth for calling her soft. You punished her, publicly, then secretly gave her a bigger javelin. This isn't abnormal. Spartan girls are raised just as rigorously as boys. Different tools, same philosophy. Strength is not optional. Obedience, yes, but not submission. They train in wrestling, running, discus throwing, even horse riding. Their bodies are state property, built for producing strong warriors. Their minds, sharper than bronze. Your daughter reminds you of a whetstone, abrasive, useful, and not to be held carelessly. You remember when she was born, no ceremony, just your wife's tight-lipped grunt and the piercing cry of something new in the world. You didn't hold her. Spartan fathers don't coddle. You just looked at her, tiny and red-faced, and already squinting like she was judging the midwife. You nodded and thought, she'll be fine, and then you went back to drill. Now she runs faster than you, and you're not even embarrassed about it. Your historical fact. Unlike most of the ancient world, Sparta educated its women, both physically and intellectually. They were expected to be strong, outspoken, and fit. Marriage wasn't a transfer of ownership, it was a state-sanctioned breeding program. Spartan women married later, around 18, and often had more influence in the home and estate than their husbands. They could own land, control wealth, and speak freely in public. Your fringe fact? Spartan women reportedly mocked their husbands if they returned from battle alive but unbloodied. Some even refused them entry into the home. There's one story of a mother killing her son for fleeing a fight. That's not folklore, it's training. From cradle to cloak, Spartan women were raised to expect death before dishonour. Not just from their sons or husbands, but from themselves. And here's the debate. Was this female empowerment, or just another form of state control? Some scholars argue Spartan women were liberated for their time, athletic, literate, politically influential. Others argue they were merely another cog in the war machine, valued solely for producing warrior sons and shaming the rest into fighting harder. Freedom, after all, can wear many masks. You try not to think of her that way as a breeding strategy. You try to think of her as a person, even when the system around her won't let her just be. You see the fire in her eyes when she trains, the way she watches the boys in the Agoge, like she wants to beat them all in a foot race and then steal their lunch. And you believe she could. But she's also your weakness, the one thing in your life that could make you turn around, run back, break rank. And that's terrifying, because that kind of attachment is a crack in the armour, a soft spot the state would rather you didn't have. You don't talk to her much, but when you do, you speak plainly. Hold your form. Don't flinch. Always return the javelin. And sometimes, when no one else is listening, I'm proud of you. She pretends not to care. She's already too Spartan for that. But you see the corner of her mouth twitch, like it's trying to remember how to smile. At festivals, she runs with the other girls in tunics cut short, kicking up dust as they sprint around the track. Cheered on by mothers and old men like you, who pretend they're not crying. She wins most of the time. When she doesn't, she kicks the ground and storms off furious. You love her more in those moments than in the victories. One day she asks you the question you hoped would never come. Did you ever run? You freeze. Not because of what she's asking, but because of what she's really asking. She's heard the rumours about Thermopylae, about how you returned. She's trying to fit that story into the man who taught her how to wrestle and bite and never blink first. You take a deep breath, then you answer, "No, but I wanted to." She doesn't say anything, just nods once, a real nod, and not respectful, not dismissive, just understanding. That moment lingers longer than any war chant. Later, you watch her practicing in the yard with a wooden blade. Her footwork is sharp, her breathing controlled. She's faster than you were at her age, smarter too. You realise she'll be fine, maybe better than fine. Maybe the future of Sparta belongs to girls like her. fierce, fearless, and not waiting for permission. That night you polish your old shield and you leave it outside her door. You don't say a word, neither does she. But the next morning it's gone, and later you find her in the hills, shadow boxing against the sunrise, your shield strapped tight to her back. You smile, a real one, for once. Not because you're proud, but because in this harsh, cold world of silence and survival, she's managed to make you feel something again. And in Sparta, that might be the bravest thing of all. You always knew the end wouldn't be quiet. Spartans don't fade gently into the afterlife. They go crashing in, sword drawn, shouting their own name loud enough for Hades to hear. Still, you'd hoped, just a little, that yours might be different. That after decades of war and ritual and silence, maybe you'd slip away under a tree somewhere. Maybe with your wife's hand in yours, your daughter humming that off-key tune she insists isn't a song, but the gods are nothing if not consistent, and they clearly aren't finished with you. It starts with whispers. A scouting party disappears near the border. Then two more. A supply convoy turns up raided, the drivers mutilated in a way that feels more message than madness. The younger warriors shift in their seats when they hear the news, fingers tightening on spear shafts. The elders go still. Everyone knows what's coming. No one says it. War again, not the glorious kind, not the 300 men marching to immortality kind. This is dirtier, hungrier, internal. A coalition of former allies and angry helots, emboldened by years of drought and rumours of Spartan weakness, has begun carving a path across the borderlands. It's rebellion. Not the first, probably not the last. But something in your gut feels different this time. You volunteer. Of course you do. It's absurd. You're old. Your knees crack just from standing. You haven't thrown a javelin in 3 years without regretting it. But you still can, and that matters. The commanders laugh at first. Then they remember your name. The laughter stops. They give you a small unit, mostly young men, fresh from the Agoge, eyes too wide, hands too clean. You recognise the look. You wore it once. Your daughter catches you sharpening your blade before you leave. She says nothing, just walks over and rewraps the leather on your hilt. Tighter this time. It's her way of saying, don't die stupidly. Your historical fact, Spartan men continued to serve in the military well into old age if their bodies allowed it. In fact, veterans were often placed in command of younger troops, serving as anchors for discipline and morale. The idea of retirement was almost foreign. Sparta needed every trained warrior, especially during internal uprisings, which were frequent in the later years. Your fringe detail? In one recorded case, an elderly Spartan commander led a campaign despite being so arthritic that he needed to be lifted onto his horse. When asked why he didn't step down, he responded, "My heart has never limped." He died in that campaign. His horse outlived him. The scholarly debate? Whether this relentless expectation of service helped preserve Spartan strength, or hollowed it out. Some argue that Sparta's insistence on using aging warriors as leadership figures gave it a psychological edge. Others claim it left them brittle, unable to adapt, dragging ghosts of past wars into battles that needed new ideas and younger blood. You ride out at dawn, your shield strapped across your back, your sword tied at your hip like an old friend. The young soldiers keep stealing glances at you, unsure whether to respect or pity you. You don't speak much on the journey. When you do, it's to correct their foot positioning, or remind them not to waste energy during long marches. They nod, obedient, nervous. The battlefield is a tangle of hills and shadowed passes. The enemy knows the terrain better. They've been living here under Spartan rule for generations. You can feel their rage in the way they strike. Quick, brutal, personal. This isn't a war over land, it's revenge. They don't want to win a city, they want to see you bleed. And you do. On the third day, an ambush takes your front scouts. You fight your way free, dragging 2 of the wounded with you. Sword clutched so tight your hand cramps for hours afterward. The young ones look at you differently now, not as a relic, as a survivor. You hold the line for 5 days. Reinforcements never come. The hill you're camped on turns into a graveyard by the end of the week. The boys stop singing. They stop eating much too. You ration morale like water. Quiet encouragement, a clapped shoulder, a muttered line of Tyrtaeus before the next ambush. On the 8th night, the final push comes. They come at you with fire, literally. Torches and oil-soaked logs, flung into your perimeter like a funeral offering. You charge with the last of them, your voice cracking from dust and age and shouting. Your sword feels heavier than it used to, but it still finds its mark. You don't remember the final blow, not clearly. Just the shock of it, the flash of steel, the ground rising up to meet you. Then silence. But you're not dead. Not yet. You wake hours later, pinned under the body of a younger soldier. You push him off gently, his face is peaceful, yours is not. There are survivors, a handful, enough. You march them back slowly, step by step. When you finally cross the city gates, no one cheers, but the commanders nod. That's enough. You collapse that night into your own bed. For the first time in years, you sleep without dreaming of Thermopylae. Your wife sits by the fire, mending your old cloak, humming the same broken tune your daughter always sings. Outside, the city breathes, hard but steady. And for once, Sparta feels still. You don't get a statue. There's no marble bust of you in the Agora, no bronze likeness standing proud in the temple square. And that's fine. You didn't live your life for stone. You didn't swing your sword thinking of fame. That kind of vanity belongs to the Athenians, all drama and drapery. Sparta taught you better. Sparta taught you that glory isn't something you chase, it's something you leave behind. Now you spend most of your days sitting under the fig tree in the yard, your old cloak wrapped tight around your shoulders even when it's warm. Your joints click like rusted hinges. Your hands tremble when you thread the needle to mend a tunic, but somehow you still remember how to do it. Your wife reminds you gently that she can take care of it. You remind her, just as gently, that you need to do something with your hands or the ghosts will get louder. She understands. She always has. Your daughter visits often. She's grown taller than you, stronger, her shoulders square, her voice steady. She talks about the girls she trains, about the land she manages, because yes, she owns land now, as a Spartan woman is allowed to. Some days she laughs about the boys who try to impress her, how easily she can outsprint them, outshoot them, outthink them. You don't offer fatherly advice, you just listen, because she doesn't need you to guide her anymore. She needs you to see her, and you do. One afternoon she brings a boy. He stands awkwardly beside her gear, all elbows and two big sandals, barely old enough to wear his first red cloak. You don't ask if he's courting her, you don't even scowl at him, which is probably why he looks so terrified. You just offer him a seat, pour him a cup of watered wine, and ask him where he trains. He stammers. Your daughter rolls her eyes. You smile, for real. Later, when they leave, she kisses your cheek and says, "He's not as dumb as he looks." You nod. That's high praise in Sparta. Here's your final historical fact. Sparta, for all its obsession with strength and war, was also a place of quiet routines. Older citizens often remained deeply involved in civic life, mentoring, managing estates, training youth, or simply offering presents. In a society that demanded so much, survival was the resume. And the last fringe detail. At least one Spartan tomb has been found containing an engraved bone token, carried not for war, but for luck. Shaped like a lion. Carved crudely. Some believe it was a child's gift, so maybe a talisman, maybe just something to hold on to when the world got too loud. You still carry yours. That tiny wooden lion she gave you all those years ago. It sits on the windowsill now, faded and cracked, but intact. You don't touch it much. You don't have to. Its presence is enough. And finally, the last debate. Was Sparta's system a miracle of social engineering, or a slow death wrapped in bronze? Historians still argue over whether it was a success, a failure, or something in between. The perfect warrior state, or a beautiful, brutal warning? You've lived it. You know the answer isn't clean. Sparta gave you everything, purpose, strength, discipline. But it also took pieces of you you'll never get back. Your softness, your song, your ability to sit beside another man without wondering if one of you has to die. But it gave you her, and that's enough. One morning you wake early. The world is quiet. Even the birds haven't started their chorus yet. You step outside barefoot, letting the cold earth remind your heels of your age. The sun's just beginning to rise over the Tegetos range, painting the sky in a soft, indifferent gold. You walk slowly towards the city's edge, where the old stones line the road, where names are carved deep into the rock, men who died at Thermopylae, at Plataea, at countless other battles no one sings about anymore. You run your fingers across a few. You don't find your name. Of course not. But one day, maybe your daughter will tell her children stories about the old man who never quite died when he was supposed to, who taught her how to hold a javelin, who came home from the mountain pass, who listened more than he spoke, who didn't flinch. That will be enough. And if no one remembers, you still do. That evening you sit under the fig tree with your wife beside you, her hand resting on yours. The wind rustles the leaves gently. Somewhere in the distance someone shouts, maybe a boy in the Agoge, maybe a girl practicing her run. You don't need to go see, you've seen enough. You close your eyes, the war is over, the shield is down, you are still. You sit there for a long time, long after the wind has settled and the last golden light has drained from the hills. It's strange, isn't it? How loud silence can be when it's the first you've truly known. All your life it's been commands, chants, steel on steel, the grunts of men lifting more than they should, the cries of boys whipped for flinching, the solemn boom of marching feet. But now there's just cicadas, a crackling log in the hearth, and your own breath slowing to a pace you finally have time to appreciate. And in this quiet, you remember. You remember the first time you held a spear. Far too heavy, your arms barely strong enough to lift it, the shaft slick with nervous sweat. You remember the icy stream where your unit was ordered to bathe in winter as a test of temper? You remember that night you didn't sleep because you were sure you'd die at dawn, and then you didn't, and how that somehow felt worse. You remember Thermopylae. You remember the boy you carried, the ones you left behind, the dust in your teeth and the sky full of arrows, the moment you knew the stories had lied, and the deeper moment, days later, when you realised they hadn't. Not entirely. You remember the girl in your house who once threw a wooden javelin at your helmet and laughed when she missed. You remember the woman who saw through your silence and let you break down quietly, by degrees, until you could breathe again. You don't need statues. You don't need scrolls or songs or gold-framed paintings hung in dimly lit halls. You've lived. And more than that, you've endured. You were a Spartan. You walked the line, held the shield, endured the whip and the silence and the fire. You obeyed, you fought, you questioned, and somehow, impossibly, you survived. And even if the world forgets your name, you know this. Your story doesn't end in blood or battle. It ends in peace, in stillness, in a small home beside a fig tree, with the sound of your daughter's laughter carried on the evening breeze. You close your eyes one last time, not in pain, not in fear, but in perfect earned exhaustion. And this time you don't have to wake up.